Jiang Chao opened his eyes to nothing but sea. Gray-blue waters stretched all the way to the horizon. The waves were moderate. No islands or land could be seen anywhere. Heavy gray clouds blotted out the sky. The sun lay hidden behind them, casting only faint, diffused white light. A thin haze hung over the sea. Distant ship silhouettes appeared briefly now and then, only to vanish into mist. Jiang Chao stood on the deck of a wooden vessel. The boat was roughly 12 meters long. Its planks were blackened with age, and a tattered gray sail hung from the mast. Two obvious gashes marked the starboard hull, and a section of deck planking was missing along the edge. The boat was not taking on water for the moment. That was the best that could be said for its condition. Gripping the gunwale, Jiang Chao scanned his surroundings rapidly. 1 second earlier, he had been working the night shift at a maritime rescue center. The kettle in the duty room had just come to a boil when blinding white light burst outside the window. When his sight returned, he found himself upon this unfamiliar ocean. A cold voice boomed out across the water. It was not loud, yet it rang clearly in every person's ears. Civilization migration complete. Welcome to the Endless Seas Global Initial Survivor Count. 821-746-3905 Global Current Survivor Count. 821-745-1672 Current Zone. 7th Initial Sea Area. Zone Initial Survivor Count. 891263 Zone Current Survivor Count. 891251 Every survivor has been granted an initial vessel. Seek resources. Reinforce your hull. Explore islands. Sink your ship. And you die. The system voice faded away. Numbers hovered in front of Jiang Chao and shifted at once. Global Current Survivor Count. 821-745-1308 7th Initial Sea Area Current Survivor Count. 891,246 in mere seconds. More than 300 people around the globe had perished. 5 had died within the 7th Sea Area. Some had lost their lives before they even understood where they were. A translucent black logbook unfurled slowly before him. It possessed no physical substance. When his fingers touched its pages, they passed straight through, yet pages turned of their own accord at his will. Captain's log activated. Captain's log visible only to its bearer. Core functions: personal status, vessel status, regional channel, item trading. Sailing log. Survivor count for the current sea zone displayed in the log's upper right corner. The first page held Jiang Chao's profile. Captain, Jiang Chao. Race: human. Physical condition: healthy. Strength: 7. Reaction: 7. Constitution: 8. Spirit: 9. Evaluation: a well-trained, ordinary human being. Jiang Chao skimmed through it quickly. None of the values exceeded normal human ranges. His slightly higher constitution stemmed from regular physical training and his maritime work. The second page described his ship. Vessel: homeward bound. Rank: 1. Hull condition: slightly damaged. Durability: 72/100ths. Base sailing speed: 4 knots. Cargo capacity: 30 units. Crew: 1/5. Available areas: deck, wheelhouse, old storage hold, sleeping quarters. Vessel trait: inactive. Evaluation: showing clear signs of age. The good news is that it will not sink for now. Jiang Chao's gaze lingered on vessel trait. Inactive implied that homeward bound held some latent capability. The log offered no further explanation. He closed the log and began inspecting his ship. Inside the wheelhouse stood an old-fashioned helm, a compass trembling constantly, and a blank chart spread across the table. The compass needle wavered back and forth, never settling on a single bearing. One black dot on the chart marked homeward bound's present location. Everything else was blank. No islands, no shipping lanes, no other vessels. The chart could not show where other survivors were located. To learn what lay nearby, he would have to see for himself. Jiang Chao entered the old storage hold, where starting supplies lay stacked. Fresh water, 10 liters rye biscuit, 5 pieces ordinary fishing rod, 1 fish hooks, 10 hemp rope, 20 meters basic timber, 5 units iron nails, 30 ship repair kit. One set hanging on the wall was a red-handled rescue axe. Its back bore a pry-breaking spike, and its grip was wrapped in non-slip rubber. It was standard-issue equipment from his former workplace. In one corner of the hold sat a single-shot flare gun loaded with 1 flare shell only. In the sleeping quarters, he found a first-aid kit, 1 set of waterproof overalls, and 2 thin blankets. There was no engine aboard, no complete fishing net, and no equipment to desalinate seawater. 10 liters of fresh water plus 5 rye biscuits might sustain him for a few days with strict rationing. Without new supplies, thirst and hunger would eventually set in. The captain's log turned to a fresh page automatically. Fundamental survival rules published 1. Driftwood, sunken wrecks, and usable resources appear randomly across the sea surface. 2. Certain islands drift into the current sea zone with ocean currents. 3. Anomalous marine creatures yield usable materials, yet pose significant danger. 4. A regional marine disaster will strike this sea zone in 7 days. 5. Untreated seawater must never be drunk. 6. Exercise extreme caution when leaving your vessel after nightfall. Disaster countdown. 6 days, 23 hours, 52 minutes, 7 days. Jiang Chao glanced at his stored fresh water. Drinking 1 liter each day would barely carry him until disaster arrived. Real-world survival seldom followed ideal calculations. High temperatures, injury, and strenuous labor all accelerated water consumption. He knew nothing about what form the coming disaster would take. Simply waiting aboard with his current supplies gave him slim odds of living through it. He had to find drinking water, food, and hull repair materials as soon as possible. The regional channel was open. Lines of text scrolled rapidly across the log pages. Where on earth am I? I was sitting in a classroom a moment ago. Can anybody see my coordinates? My boat is leaking badly. It seems we cannot view each other's positions unless someone chooses to share them. Does anyone know how to repair boats? I will trade 2 biscuits for repair advice. I found a strange brass scale in my cabin. Does anyone know what it does? Post a picture. Why should I show you? How can I trust your motives? Something just bumped against my hull. Has anybody fished up food? Only messages actively posted by survivors appeared on the channel. The system revealed no information about other people's ships, stockpiles, or physical state. Even posted messages might not be truthful. That brass scale might genuinely exist, or it could be bait invented to lure trading partners. Within these strange waters, intelligence was just as precious as supplies, and bad intelligence could get you killed. Jiang Chao chose not to post anything for the time being. He walked to the gunwale and scanned the surrounding sea. Several planks drifted past on the swell, alongside a white plastic bucket and a tattered fishing net. The nearest piece of timber lay roughly 10 meters away. Both the boat and floating debris shifted continuously with the current. From storage, he fetched his hemp rope and tied one end firmly to the axe handle. He tested its balance. Judging wind and distance, he swung the rescue axe and hurled it outward. It spun through the air, its spike lodging firmly inside a crack in the driftwood. Jiang Chao hauled the rope hand over hand, drawing the timber toward his ship. Obtained basic timber ×1. The notification was plain, with no bonus for his first salvage. He pulled aboard 3 more planks and dragged in the white plastic bucket. Its lid remained sealed. Inside sat around 4 liters of turbid liquid. Unpurified fresh water contained sediment, bacteria, and trace unknown parasites not fit for direct consumption. Still, it was fresh water. Sedimentation, filtering, and boiling might make it usable in an emergency. The fishing net was too badly damaged to catch fish, yet it could be unraveled into sturdy cordage for securing gear or building simple traps. Jiang Chao laid his newly salvaged planks across the gashes on the starboard hull and fastened them temporarily with iron nails. Homeward-bound durability. 76 out of 100. The cracks were covered, though the repair looked rough. Stronger waves would very likely tear those planks loose again. Next, he cast his fishing rod. Half an hour slipped by without so much as a tremor on the float. The sea was unnaturally quiet. No fish broke the surface, no seabirds wheeled overhead. On the regional channel, people claimed to have salvaged sealed resource crates. Someone uploaded a photo of a strange fish. It was palm-sized, its belly split open into a massive mouth bristling with black fangs. Is this thing edible? You actually think you can eat that? The system says anomalous creatures yield materials. Don't throw it away yet. I will give you half a liter of water for it. Half a liter? You must be joking. The poster made no further reply. A dozen minutes later, their status on the channel turned gray. Jiang Chao checked the logs upper right corner. 7th initial sea area current survivor count. 890714. Less than 3 hours since arrival. More than 500 people in this sea zone were dead. Some had fallen overboard. Some had drowned when their vessels failed. Others had evidently encountered horrors similar to that grotesque fish. He reeled in his fishing rod. Light filtering through the gray clouds dimmed fast. Night fell abruptly across the endless seas. One moment, distant ship outlines remained faintly visible. The next, thick fog rolled in from all directions and swallowed them. Visibility around homeward bound shrank to less than 20 meters. The sea turned deep black, waves thudding against the hull in dull, heavy rhythm. The captain's log opened once more. Nighttime warning updated 1. Do not answer calls coming out of the fog. 2. Never consume marine life, whose safety you cannot verify. 3. If your hull receives 3 consecutive knocks, extinguish all light sources immediately. 4. Inspect every cabin after midnight. Jiang Chao's eyes settled on Rule 4. Homeward Bound contained 3 compartments: wheelhouse, old storage hold, and sleeping quarters. He had checked all of them already. The system's special reminder meant something would shift or emerge after midnight, bringing fresh danger. He prepared in advance. He ate half a rye biscuit and drank a small amount of fresh water. He set the rescue axe within easy reach and fastened the flare gun to the outside of his waterproof overalls. One end of the remaining hemp rope was secured to a main support pillar inside the wheelhouse, the other looped loosely around his waist. If cabin space is warped or rearranged, the rope would help him find his way back. Time dragged onward. Messages on the regional channel grew sparser. Every so often a desperate plea appeared. "I hear someone calling my name out there. Do not reply. It is pounding against my hull. Turn off your lights." Now, no further messages followed. Jiang Chao glanced at the log counter. 7th Initial Sea Area Current Survivor Count, 889682. In under 2 hours of darkness, another 1,000 people had perished. Night had barely begun. He closed the regional channel. Homeward Bound rocked gently on black water. Age-worn planks creaked from time to time, sounds echoing deep inside the vessel. 1 minute remained until midnight. Jiang Chao descended into the lower cabins. To his left lay the old storage hold. To his right, the sleeping quarters. At the far end of the corridor stood a solid black wooden wall. Judging by the vessel's 12-meter overall length, no extra room could exist behind that wall toward the stern. 23 hours, 59 minutes, and 55 seconds. Jiang Chao tightened his grip on the rescue axe. 23 hours, 59 minutes, and 58 seconds. Homeward Bound shuddered faintly. 23 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds. Midnight. Thud. A dull bang resonated from behind the wooden wall. A thin vertical crack split its center. The crack widened. A door frame, door panel, and brass doorknob materialized little by little out of what had been solid wood. In fewer than 10 seconds, a deep red wooden door stood at the corridor's far end. Its surface glistened damp, as though hauled straight out of salt water. Dark seawater seeped through its threshold and pooled across the floorboards. The captain's log fluttered its pages rapidly. Homeward Bound's previously inactive vessel trait had unlocked. Homeward Bound unique trait activated 10,000 world cabin. Every midnight at midnight, an unknown doorway manifests aboard Homeward Bound. Beyond the door may lie resources, ancient ruins, alien civilizations, or anomalous life forms. First door manifested. A pale gray nameplate materialized on the deep red door. Fogwood Island, abandoned dock type. Inland portal status. Unexplored threat level, low special notice. Fogwood Island has not yet drifted into this sea zone. Jiang Chao read that final line closely. Almost 900,000 survivors across the 7th Sea area were still bobbing on open water, salvaging timber and scavenging food, waiting for the very first islands to arrive with ocean currents. Meanwhile, a door inside his ship already connected him to the interior of a continent that had not reached this zone. A soft scraping sound came from the other side of the door. Shoo! Something heavy and damp dragged itself across stone and timber somewhere deep within the abandoned dock. Then the brass doorknob began to turn downwards. Whatever stood behind the door was trying to open it from the far side. The brass doorknob kept turning slowly downward. Jiang Chao tightened his hold on the rescue axe and stepped sideways. Dark water leaking past the threshold spread across the floor, and a strong fish-reeking stench filled the corridor. Click! The latch gave way. The deep red door swung outward a few centimeters. Whatever was inside fell still for a brief instant. Jiang Chao stared through the widening gap, one hand brushing the rope looped about his waist. He had tied its far end to the wheelhouse pillar. 20 meters was not long enough for deep exploration, yet it would stop him from being dragged bodily through the doorway. The door creaked open further. No claws or monsters lunged out. A waterlogged black wooden pole toppled forward through the gap and clattered onto the floor, producing that same dragging sound. Jiang Chao waited several seconds, then pushed the door fully open using the flat back of his axe. The scene on the other side unfolded before him. A damp wooden pier stretched forward, flanked on both sides by pitch-black water. Further away leaned several derelict warehouses draped in dark green moss. Dim oil lamps hung on wooden posts, casting faint light over a small nearby area. Dense fog concealed everything beyond the end of the pier. The captain's log activated automatically. Fogwood Island, abandoned dock, current exploration progress. 0% portal stability duration. 3 hours threat level. Low potential recoverable resources. Unknown return method. Pass back through this doorway. 3 hours. Jiang Chao looked down at the rope around his waist and untied the knot. 20 meters would only restrict his movement during exploration. He wedged a block of timber beneath the door hinge to stop it slamming shut unexpectedly. From storage, he took one rye biscuit and half a liter of fresh water. The flared gun hung at his hip. The rescue axe remained firmly in his hand. After these brief preparations, he stepped over the threshold. The moment his soles touched pier planks, the roar of ocean waves vanished entirely. Homeward Bound still rocked gently behind the doorway. Water on the dockside lay perfectly still, smooth as black glass. He glanced backward. The deep red door stood isolated at the end of the pier, and through its frame, he could still see Homeward Bound's cabin. Two spaces were linked by that single portal. He stepped back into the ship, then crossed out onto the pier once more. The doorway functioned reliably. Satisfied his retreat was guaranteed, Jiang Chao began surveying his surroundings. The pier was littered with splintered wood and broken rope. Many planks had rotted from constant damp. Rust-eaten rails ran beneath his feet toward the warehouses ahead. Beside the tracks sat a wooden freight cart. Inside lay chunks of off-white ore. Jiang Chao picked one piece up. Crude salt ore contains numerous impurities. May be refined for human consumption or used to process materials harvested from anomalous creatures. Salt. Out on the open sea, where no reliable food preservation methods existed, salt held considerable value. Jiang Chao filled sacks from the cart with ore and set them beside the doorway. The survivor counter in the corner of his log continued to tick downward. 7th initial sea area current survivor count. 889407. Less than 10 minutes had passed since midnight. Distant people were still sending cries for help over the regional channel. My hull has been struck twice more. I have extinguished all lights, yet it keeps knocking. Someone please save me. I will give away everything I own. Do not share your coordinates. You cannot tell whether whoever comes is human or something else. Jiang Chao closed the channel. He possessed no means to rescue strangers lost within the fog. He had to survive first before he could hope to help anybody else. The main door of the first warehouse hung half ajar. Jiang Chao paused outside and listened. Silence reigned inside. He pushed it open with the shaft of his axe. Dust and mildew washed over him. Inside stood many wooden crates, most rotted away, their contents reduced to black sludge. Against one wall, 3 sealed barrels remained relatively intact. Jiang Chao tapped each barrel with the back of his axe. The sound was dull. He pried open the lid of the first one and caught a faint, clean wooden scent. It held fresh water. Old Harbor Reserve water quality. Safe for drinking volume, 25 liters. Jiang Chao inspected the other 2 barrels. The second also held drinking water. The third contained rotten salt-cured fish reeking so badly it could not be eaten. 50 liters of safe drinking water in total. Combined with his original shipboard reserves, his short-term water crisis was solved, provided no disaster struck. Many survivors on the regional channel would gladly trade food, timber, or repair kits for single liters of water. Jiang Chao decided against trading right away. He could not reveal where his supplies came from. A newcomer only hours removed from civilization suddenly producing dozens of liters of drinkable water would arouse suspicion and draw unwanted attention. He rolled both water barrels toward the warehouse doorway. They were far too heavy to carry directly back aboard his ship unaided. The pier's rails and freight cart presented the perfect solution. He cleared crude salt ore out of the cart, heaved both barrels aboard, and secured them with old rope. The whole process took more than 20 minutes. A notification popped up on his captain's log. Obtained 50 liters of safe drinking water. Abandoned dock exploration progress. 4%. Only 4%. The abandoned dock was far larger than it appeared from its entrance. Jiang Chao pushed the water-laden cart all the way to the portal. He rolled the first barrel through into Homeward Bound's cabin without difficulty. No volume restriction warnings appeared. Resources gathered beyond the doorway could be brought back to his vessel. The true worth of Homeward Bound had just become clear. While everybody else drifted across open ocean gambling on random supply crates and waiting for islands to drift near, Jiang Chao already had access to a continent that had not even arrived within his sea zone. Just this abandoned dock alone held enough resources for him to sustain himself for quite some time. He secured the water bucket in the corner of the warehouse and headed back to the old dock. He had 3 hours on site. Even after emptying the water barrel, there was still time left to keep exploring. The second warehouse was smaller than the first, its door sealed by a rusted padlock. Jiang Chao pried twice with his rescue axe. The lock clasp tore free along with a chunk of rotted wood and clattered to the ground. Inside lay fishing nets, buoys, iron hooks, and several long-handled fishing spears. Most of the nets were torn but could still be mended for use. The wooden shafts of the spears had turned damp, though their metal tips remained in good condition. On the shelf furthest inside rested a strangely constructed short-range gun. Its frame was built from black timber and brass. It featured a broad, circular muzzle, with a small pressurized air tank mounted to its rear. 6 barbed short fishing spears sat beside it. Antique pneumatic harpoon gun condition. Slightly damaged effective range. 12 meters requires replacement of air seal gasket. Remaining shots available. 2. Jiang Chao inspected the weapon. Its pneumatic mechanism differed greatly from real-world diving spear guns, yet he could make sense of its core layout. A coiled rope ran along the bottom of the barrel. After firing, the harpoon would not fly completely loose and could be rewound by a winch. This was exactly the long-range weapon he needed right now. His rescue axe worked well for close combat and forced entry. The flare gun held only 1 round, best saved for illumination or distress signals. The pneumatic harpoon gun's stopping power was still unknown, yet it let him strike before monsters drew near. Jiang Chao slung the harpoon gun over his back. He also picked out 1 moderately intact fishing net and 2 coils of heavy-duty rope. Obtained. Antique pneumatic harpoon gun obtained. Old Harbor fishing net obtained X6. Crude fishing spears current old dock exploration progress. 9%. This entry had absolutely been worthwhile. Once he repaired the fishing net back aboard, Jiang Chao could expand his fishing range. The harpoon gun would also improve safety on future expeditions. Jiang Chao glanced at the timer. 2 hours and 7 minutes remained before the portal stabilized no longer. The 2 warehouses had already yielded plenty of supplies. Further deeper into the dock stood more buildings. Pushing onward promised greater rewards, yet carried higher risk. Instead of rushing inward, he first carried all newly looted goods back onto the homebound vessel to lock in his gains. Carrying the net and harpoon gun, Jiang Chao set off. As he walked past the first warehouse, he halted abruptly. The water hauling cart still stood beside the doorway. The second water barrel sat right where he had left it. But a trail of damp footprints stretched across the wooden pier. The prints originated at the water on the right and led straight to the water cart. Each print showed 5 slender toes with clear webbing across the midsole. Whatever had made them had lingered by the barrels before following the railway tracks deeper inland. Jiang Chao knelt to examine them. The moisture had not yet dried. Something had climbed ashore while he searched the second warehouse. It had not tampered with the water barrels, nor had it found the homebound portal. Perhaps it had never spotted the gateway, or maybe it watched from concealment. Jiang Chao stood, drew the harpoon gun off his shoulder, and opened the pressure valve. The gauge confirmed enough pressure remained for 2 shots. He loaded 1 short barbed spear into the muzzle and advanced toward the portal. Silence hung all around. Oil lamp flames flickered gently. Ripples suddenly spread outward across the water to his right. Jiang Chao raised the harpoon gun. Nothing could be seen beneath the dark surface. The ripples washed against the pier planks and faded away. Keeping the muzzle angled downward, he moved slowly toward the cart. The portal stood merely over 10 meters ahead. If he safely rolled the second water barrel back, this expedition would already count as a solid success. Jiang Chao hung the harpoon gun back on its shoulder sling and gripped the cart handles with both hands. The wooden wheels creaked into motion. He had traveled less than 2 meters when planks beneath the left-hand pier cracked sharply. Crack! A gray-green palm smashed through rotted timber and seized the cart wheel. The wagon jolted to an instant stop. Jiang Chao let go immediately and sprang backward. The next moment, massive force tore open a whole section of pier planking. Splinters flew everywhere. A nearly 2-meter-tall humanoid creature surged up out of the black water and crashed down between the cart and the homebound portal. Fine fish scales covered its whole body. Its shoulders were broad. Dark red gill flaps fluttered open and shut continuously along either side of its neck. Water dripped nonstop from its body. In its grip, it held a heavily rusted bone-cleaving knife. Several water-bleached human teeth hung strung from its waist. The monster twisted its head. Beneath translucent nictitating membranes, pale gray pupils locked firmly onto Jiang Chao. A notification materialized in his captain's log. Detected aberrant creature. Mist-gilled merfolk threat level. Roaming the merfolk slowly parted its jaws to reveal rows of fine, sharp fangs. It planted itself squarely across the path to the portal. The cleaver scraped harshly across the wooden planks. Jiang Chao braced the harpoon gun against his shoulder and visually gauged the separation. 12 meters, well within effective firing range. The merfolk hunched low. Muscles bulged along its legs. Jiang Chao squeezed the trigger. At the exact same instant, the creature lunged forward. Boom. Compressed air boomed across the old dock. The harpoon sliced through the air toward the merfolk's chest. The monster reacted with startling speed, twisting mid-leap. Squelch. The spear glanced off chest scales and buried itself deep inside its left shoulder. The heavy impact jarred the merfolk and forced it half a step backward. Jiang Chao spun the winch mounted under the harpoon gun, reeling the attached rope taut. Barbs anchored firmly inside the wound. Every wriggle tore the injury wider. Black bodily fluid streamed down its scales. Hit. Mistguild merfolk dealt minor piercing damage. Jiang Chao frowned. Even a near point-blank hit had only inflicted a moderate wound on the monster's shoulder. The Mistguild merfolk possessed far greater physical resistance than he had anticipated. Glancing down at the taut rope, the merfolk raised its rusted cleaver and slashed hard toward the cord. Jiang Chao reacted instantly. He wrenched sideways, yanking the merfolk by its embedded harpoon. The cleaver swept wide of the rope and bit hard into the pier planks. Bang! Rotting wood chips sprayed everywhere. Jiang Chao released the winch and lunged for the water cart. Before the merfolk could give chase, the rope attached to its shoulder wrapped around the cart handle. He seized the side of the wagon and shoved hard. Wooden wheels rumbled along rust-covered rails. The barrel weighed dozens of kilograms. Combined with the cart's own mass, gravity accelerated it along the gently sloped track. The rope tied to the merfolk's shoulder grew taut under the wagon's pull. When it tried to step forward, its entire left arm was dragged sharply backward. The monster roared and planted its feet firmly against the pier. The cart ground to a halt with a shrill screech. Ropes stretched rigid between man and beast. Jiang Chao grabbed his rescue axe and charged straight at the merfolk. The monster's full attention remained fixed on the straining cart. Only when Jiang Chao closed and did it register his advance. The axe crashed toward its neck. Clang! A heavy dull ring echoed. The axe bit through only the outermost scale layer before being stopped by tough underlying tissue. Recoil vibrated violently up the axe shaft, numbing both of Jiang Chao's hands. The merfolk whirled and swept its cleaver horizontally. The blade grazed Jiang Chao's chest, slitting open his waterproof outer suit and cutting through his underclothing. Sharp burning pain spread across his chest. Jiang Chao stepped back, holding the axe defensively before him. The merfolk lifted its cleaver for another downward strike. Instead of blocking head-on, Jiang Chao ducked under the swing and kicked hard against the inner side of its knee. The creature staggered. He used that opening to retreat and create distance. That axe strike had proven plain. Scales deflected ordinary metal blades. Hacking at its torso would only waste his stamina. The harpoon embedded in its shoulder, linked to the cart, restricted its movement. The merfolk understood that too. Abandoning pursuit, it spun around and aimed to sever the rope. Holding the axe in his right hand, Jiang Chao quickly drew the flare gun clipped at his waist. Only one flare remained. It ought to have been reserved for illumination, emergency distress signals, or sea marking. Right now, the merfolk blocked his only way home, vastly outmatching him in raw melee strength. Hoarding that single shot might cost him any chance of escape. Jiang Chao raised the flare pistol. Hearing the movement, the merfolk snapped its head toward him. Bang! A red flare arced outward, trailing flame. Less than 6 meters separated them. Instinctively, the merfolk lifted its right arm to shield its face. The flare slammed into its forearm, bursting into fire. Hiss! Acrid smoke and the stench of burning flesh filled the air. Scales along the outer side of its arm scorched black. The merfolk let out a high-pitched shriek and shook its arm wildly to beat out clinging flames. Jiang Chao dared not hesitate. He charged forward again, swinging the rescue axe upward from below. This time he avoided heavily armored, scale-covered areas. As the merfolk screamed, its dark red neck gills flared wide open. The axe edge sliced cleanly into the left gill slit. Squelch! Black blood sprayed all over Jiang Chao. The merfolk howled and struck out with its right arm. Unable to pull his axe free, Jiang Chao raised his left forearm to block. Thud! The blow felt like being clubbed with an iron bar. Jiang Chao was sent flying backward, slamming hard against the side of the cart. The water barrel rocked violently. His left arm throbbed, almost completely numb. Yet the merfolk could not press its assault. The axe remained jammed deep inside its gill. Every twitch tore the wound further open. It gaped and let out guttural snarls. Leaning against the cart, Jiang Chao pulled himself upright. For the first time, obvious terror showed within the merfolk's gray eyes. It reached for the axe handle, intending to yank the weapon loose. Jiang Chao glanced toward the railway tracks stretching behind the monster. The rails ran straight to the pier edge where wooden barriers had long rotted away. A strong enough impact would send the whole wagon plunging into the dark water. Jiang Chao bent down and pulled free the wooden brake block wedged beneath one wheel. While the merfolk struggled to extract the embedded axe, the rope connected to its shoulder hung slack for a brief moment. Jiang Chao tossed the brake aside. Unrestrained, the cart immediately began sliding forward. The rope snapped taut once more. Half withdrawn, the axe jammed tight again, yanking the merfolk stumbling backward. Jiang Chao lowered his shoulder and rammed it against the wagon. Get back! The heavily laden barrel accelerated. The cart slammed into the merfolk. The monster tried to brace itself, yet the combined weight drove it backward across splintering planks. Crack! The rotten barrier at the pier edge shattered under impact. Both merfolk and cart toppled toward the black water below. At the very last instant, the monster grabbed onto broken pier timbers, hanging half-submerged above the waves. The cart had already fallen. The heavy barrel dragged the attached rope downward, wrenching the merfolk's left shoulder grotesquely out of alignment. Jiang Chao hurried forward, seized the rescue axe handle firmly. The merfolk lifted its head toward him, black blood pouring from its mouth. Jiang Chao planted one boot down hard onto the monster's grasping fingers wrapped around the wood and pulled backward with all his strength. The axe tore free of the gill wound, and black blood sprayed once more. The merfolk screamed horribly and swiped wildly at Jiang Chao's ankles. Jiang Chao raised the axe and struck repeatedly at the already torn gill tissue. The first blow split flesh wide open. The second hacked cleanly through cervical bone. By the third blow, all tension vanished from the merfolk's body. Its fingers slowly loosened their grip on the pier. Splash! Dragged down by the sunken cart, the creature vanished beneath the black water. Only the rope attached to its shoulder draped across splintered timber. Jiang Chao stood gasping heavily. His left arm stayed numb. The tear in his waterproof suit oozed blood. The cleaver strike had only produced shallow lacerations across his chest. Those wounds were not critical. The real trouble was the heavy blow to his left arm. No bone seemed broken, yet it could barely bear any exertion for the moment. Updates unfolded inside his captain's log. Aberrant creature slain. Mist Guild merfolk completed first kill of aberrant creature within the 7th initial sea zone. Survival points gained. 21st kill reward acquired X1. Basic hull repair blueprint Mistwood Island Old Dock exploration progress updated to 15% harvestable materials. Mistgill, merfolk scales, webbed membrane, contaminated flesh. Jiang Chao checked the player count display in the corner of his vision. Remaining survivors within 7th initial sea zone. 889 131. No one in the public chat channel had mentioned the monster kill. No global system announcement had appeared. Evidently, the first kill reward was visible only to him. That suited Jiang Chao perfectly. He returned to the homebound vessel first. Retrieving disinfectants and bandages from his first aid kit, he dressed his chest injuries. His left arm showed no obvious deformation but flared with sharp pain whenever moved. He would have to minimize using it. Once bandaged, Jiang Chao traveled back to the old dock. The water lay calm again. One end of the rope still hung submerged. Using a fixed bollard on the pier, he hauled the merfolk's corpse bit by bit back onto solid planking. The body was slippery and heavy, taking almost 10 minutes to drag ashore. Its neck had been mostly severed, and its gills completely destroyed. Using his diving knife, Jiang Chao cut out the relatively intact remaining gill. Mist, gill quality. Common uses: filtration hardware, underwater, breathing apparatus, reagents for damp. Environment alchemy processing requirement. Must be treated with coarse salt to neutralize contamination. Fortuitously, he had recovered stocks of coarse salt or aboard the cart earlier. The merfolk scales also held practical value. Mist, Guild merfolk scales quality. Common possess moderate water, resistance, and cut. Resistance usable to craft protective gear and ship, hull cladding. Jiang Chao selected 12 relatively undamaged scales. He also retrieved the merfolk's rusted cleaver lying nearby. Merfolk bone, cleaving knife condition. Heavily rusted blade bears mild residual contamination, may be scrapped from metal once fully cleaned. These spoils were hardly abundant, yet gathering them had been far more efficient than scavenging driftwood out at sea. The first, kill blueprint was especially valuable. Basic hull, repair blueprint crafting requirements. X10 basic timber, X20 iron nails, X1 waterproof adhesive. Effect, restores 15 hull durability and reinforces 1 damaged section. Jiang Chao still lacked sufficient timber, and he had yet to find any waterproof adhesive. Perhaps supplies remained hidden somewhere inside the old dock. He transported all harvested monster materials plus the rusted cleaver back onto the homebound vessel. 1 hour and 27 minutes remained before portal stability expired. With the merfolk eliminated, silence returned across the dock. The second 25-liter water barrel had been lost when the cart sank into the sea, a meaningful setback. Still, the first barrel of fresh water had safely made it onto his boat. Combined with his starting reserves and another barrel waiting for purification, his short-term water needs were covered. Further searching might well unearth more supplies. Jiang Chao reloaded his pneumatic harpoon gun. The spear fired in combat remained embedded in the merfolk's shoulder and had been recovered together with the corpse. Only one pressure-charged shot remained. His injured left arm would also hinder fighting. Rather than recklessly push deeper into the dock, Jiang Chao followed the merfolk's earlier damp footprints behind the first warehouse. The creature's trail implied a nearby territory regularly used by its kind. Circling behind the warehouse, a narrow wooden walkway came into sight. At its far end stood a low stone hut. Its doorway hung open, dim light glowing from within. Jiang Chao halted outside and listened carefully. No footsteps or breathing sounds reached his ears. Holding the harpoon gun ready, he stepped inside. A long table occupied the main room. Bone, made tools, and dried water, plants hung from the walls. In one corner sat rough earthen jars holding salt, fish oil, and a thick black gummy substance. Old, harbor waterproof pitch used for repairing hulls, fishing, nets, and wooden implements. He had located the final material required by the hull repair blueprint. Jiang Chao collected 2 jars of the pitch. Beneath the table, he also found 3 pre-processed timber planks. He still had not gathered enough total materials. As he prepared to search further, a soft metallic clink echoed deep inside the stone hut. Clink. It sounded like something striking metal. Jiang Chao raised his harpoon gun and advanced toward the source of the noise. At the rear of the hut, a wooden ladder led downwards, descending into a damp cellar. Faint yellow light filtered upward from underground. As he reached the entrance, a heavy smell of blood washed over him. 6 iron cages lined the cellar floor. 5 stood empty. Inside the final cage huddled 3 figures. They bore a close resemblance to humans, with pale skin and fine gray bony ridges running behind their ears. Their garments were woven from water, plant fiber, and rough hide. An adult woman shielded 2 young children. A strip of coarse cloth was tightly wrapped around her left leg, thoroughly soaked through with blood. When Jiang Chao appeared, the woman flinched backward in terror. Then she noticed the merfolk cleaver in his grasp and the black blood staining his clothes. Her expression shifted. A notification popped up in the captain's log. Unknown sentient life, form detected, language not yet decoded. Jiang Chao stopped walking. He slowly lowered the harpoon, gun muzzle, and gestured toward the cage door. The woman seemed to understand and nodded quickly. The door was fastened shut with a lock carved from fish, bone. Ordinary keys would not open it. Jiang Chao struck twice with the flat of his rescue axe, only scratching the bone lock. Switching to the sharp corner of the axe head, he jammed it into the lock opening and pried hard. Crack! The bone lock snapped cleanly. The cage door swung outwards. The 2 children remained too afraid to step outside. The adult woman attempted to stand, yet her injured left leg buckled under her weight. Jiang Chao reached out and steadied her. Her body stiffened briefly. Then she pointed outside the stone hut and spoke rapidly in her alien tongue. Jiang Chao could not comprehend a single word. She repeated herself twice more, then lifted her hands to mime a towering silhouette and pointed toward the spot where the merfolk corpse lay. Jiang Chao grasped her general meaning. More merfolk roamed nearby and might return soon. He checked the remaining portal time, 1 hour and 3 minutes. Traveling with an injured adult and 2 small children ruled out further exploration. These 3 lives represented far greater value than a handful of planks. They likely originated from Mistwood Island and might hold knowledge of the old harbor and surrounding lands. Using hand gestures, Jiang Chao signaled for the woman to follow him. Then he lifted the younger child into his arms. The woman hoisted the second child onto her back and hobbled forward despite her painful leg injury. No sooner had they stepped out of the stone hut than a deep horn blast boomed from deeper within the dock. Hoo! The sound carried far along the water channels. One after another, distant oil lamps flickered to light. Tall shapes emerged through thick fog, advancing along the wooden pier. Leading the group stood a merfolk even bulkier than the one Jiang Chao had killed, hefting a large serrated bone fork across its shoulders. For ordinary merfolk followed close behind. Seeing that towering figure, the woman's face drained of all color. She clutched the child on her back tightly and repeated one single syllable over and over. Though Jiang Chao could not understand her speech, the meaning was unambiguous. Run! 5 merfolk blocked the main path toward the homebound portal. Jiang Chao glanced back toward the stone hut, then at railway tracks branching off toward the far side of the dock. His harpoon gun held exactly 1 remaining shot. His left arm remained wounded. 3 defenseless civilians depended on him. Open combat meant certain defeat. Jiang Chao gently set down the child he carried. He pointed toward a wooden freight wagon beside the stone hut and mimed pushing motion. The woman stared blankly for a second before comprehension dawned. Working together, they settled both children safely onto the empty cart. Jiang Chao gripped the wagon handle and shoved hard along an alternate railway, heading toward the outermost edge of the old dock, away from the homebound portal. Spotting their fleeing quarry, the 5 merfolk broke into a rapid pursuit. Jiang Chao glanced backward once. The portal stability timer kept ticking down. Time remaining: 58 minutes and 47 seconds to reach the homebound vessel again. He first needed to shake off their pursuers before circling back along an alternate route. The wooden wheels rattled violently over uneven rails. Ahead, the fog thinned. A suspension bridge spanned across a wide waterway. On the far bank stood a stone stele carved all over with fish, bone script. The captain's log produced a partial translation. Fish, bone tribold, harbor refuge warning. Do not activate tidal. Return sluice without authorization. Jiang Chao pushed the cart onto the suspension bridge. The pursuing merfolk closed to within a dozen meters. The lead giant merfolk raised its serrated bone fork and hurled it straight at Jiang Chao's back. Hearing the projectile whistle through air, Jiang Chao threw himself sideways. The fork sailed past his shoulder and embedded itself deep into the rear panel of the wagon. The impact jolted the cart forward sharply. Both children cried out in alarm. One main suspension rope on the bridge snapped with a sharp crack. The whole structure lurched heavily to one side. Jiang Chao grabbed the wagon handle to keep it from tipping. The woman pointed urgently down toward massive wooden flood gates beneath the bridge. She shouted repeatedly in her native tongue. Jiang Chao followed her pointing gaze. Heavy iron chains operating the sluice gates ran upward to a winding winch mounted right beside the bridge deck. All 5 merfolk were now charging onto the unstable suspension bridge. Jiang Chao glanced at the failing bridge structure and closed his hand around the winch's locking lever. He finally understood the warning carved on the stone tablet. Once the tide return gate was opened, the flood surging through the waterway would smash the entire suspension bridge to pieces. The fish folk also grasped what he intended to do. The burly fish folk at the front roared, bursting forward with even greater speed. Jiang Chao wrenched the brake lever down hard. Boom! A heavy crash echoed from beneath the bridge. The long, sealed tide return gate slowly rumbled open. Boom! Another dull crash reverberated below. Time. Worn wooden gate panels rose gradually. Gears and iron chains grated against one another, sending clouds of rust flakes tumbling into the water. At first, only a thin line of foaming white water showed. Seconds later, seawater pent up behind the gate burst forth in full force. The current slammed against the stone walls on either side with deafening thunder, and the whole suspension bridge shook violently. 5 fish folk had already reached the bridge deck. The burly lead creature dropped onto all fours, driving its bone fork deep into the planks to hold its balance. The ordinary fish folk behind it lacked such quick reflexes. 2 lost their footing at once and slid toward the bridge edge across the sloping deck. Jiang Chao gripped the cart handle tightly. Get down. The woman could not understand his words, yet she read his gesture perfectly. She immediately pressed the 2 children flat against the cart and crouched over them. The very next instant, the first wave crashed into the suspension bridge. Bang! The bridge deck jolted sharply upward. Jiang Chao's feet lifted off the planks. His abdomen slammed hard against the handlebars. His recently dressed wound across the chest split open once more, blood quickly soaking through the bandages. Gritting his teeth, he clung firmly to the cart. 2 fish folk on the bridge were swept away by the surge. One caught hold of a side rope and hung dangling above the void. The other plunged straight into the channel and vanished. 3 remained, pressing onward. The burly fish folk drew its bone fork and advanced step by step against the pounding current. Gills flared wide on either side of its neck. Seawater troubled it far less than humans. Jiang Chao glanced ahead. The far end of the suspension bridge was still more than 10 meters away. One load, bearing rope had already snapped. The deck could collapse completely at any moment. Pushing the cart was no longer feasible. He pointed toward the opposite bank, then gestured at the 2 children. The woman gave a quick nod. Jiang Chao wrenched free the bone fork wedged in the cart's rear board. Nearly 2 meters long, the weapon had been carved from pale gray bone, with 3 jagged prongs at its tip. It carried considerable weight. The moment his injured left arm bore force, searing pain shot through his shoulder. Adjusting his grip, he drove the bone fork into the bridge planks to serve as a support. Go! He shoved the cart forward again. The woman shielded the children, struggling to keep her footing amid the chaos. The burly fish, Folk, stood merely 8 meters away. It lifted its head and roared orders toward its companions. The two remaining fish, Folk, split apart. One seized ropes along the bridge side, attempting to circle around underneath. The other snatched a short sword lying on the planks and closed in rapidly from the right. Jiang Chao unslung his harpoon gun from his shoulder. The pressure tank held only one final shot. He did not aim for the burly fish, Folk. The gap in size and natural defenses made a single shot unlikely to stop it. He shifted the muzzle and locked onto the fish, Folk, climbing along the side. Bang! The harpoon streaked forth. It pierced straight through the creature's palm, pinning it to a bridge side post. The monster let out a shrill scream. Jiang Chao tossed the harpoon gun onto the cart. The bridgehead drew near. 5 meters. 3 meters. 1 meter. The cart's front wheels finally rolled onto solid stone ground. The woman snatched up one child and hobbled forward on her injured leg. Jiang Chao grabbed the second child by the collar, lifted him off the cart, and set him safely beside her. Head inside. He nodded toward the thick fog behind the stone tablet. The woman hesitated for a moment, then tugged at Jiang Chao's sleeve and spoke rapidly. The captain's log still had not finished parsing the local tongue. Only 2 repeated syllables registered clearly to Jiang Chao. Tide, return. The burly fish, Folk, had reached the bridgehead. Jiang Chao pushed the woman forward and spun around to grab the last intact main support rope anchored to the shore, mounted wooden winch. Under normal circumstances, a rescue axe could never sever this heavy rope quickly, but the tidal surge had already stretched the cable to its breaking point. Jiang Chao raised his axe and struck hard at the most frayed section. His first blow only sliced through the outer hemp fibers. The burly fish, Folk, stepped onto solid ground and reached for the nape of his neck. Jiang Chao twisted aside. The creature's claws scraped across his waterproof jacket, tearing away a strip of fabric. He swung back, driving the axe toward the monster's wrist. The axe head struck scales, leaving nothing but a shallow white scratch. The burly fish, Folk, drove its knee forward. Jiang Chao blocked with the axe handle. Crash! The impact traveled along the wood and jarred deep inside his chest. He staggered 2 steps backward, his lower back slamming against the winch. A metallic, tasted warmth welled up in his throat, which he forced down. This fish, Folk, possessed vastly greater strength than the ones he had fought before. If he stayed locked in close combat, he would not hold out for long. The fish, Folk, armed with the short sword, was also fast approaching the shore. Jiang Chao glanced down at the ground beneath the monster's feet. The wooden planks of the bridgehead sat soaked in seawater, their joints loose and unstable. Abruptly, he let go of his rescue axe and seized the winch crank. The burly fish, Folk, lunged. Jiang Chao spun the crank violently. The taut support rope pulled inward, tilting the whole suspension bridge sharply upward. The fish, Folk, lost its balance and slid sideways. Seizing the opening, Jiang Chao snatched up the bone fork and thrust its tip upward toward the monster's abdomen. Squelch! Though the fork failed to pierce its scale armor, it lifted the creature clean off its feet. The burly fish, Folk, grabbed the shaft of the fork and bore down with both arms. The bone implement bent under the strain. Jiang Chao planted his feet against the winch base, throwing his full body weight onto the handle. A brief, desperate stalemate ensued. On the far side of the bridge, the short, sword-wielding fish, Folk, leaped high. Stepping off its companion's shoulder, it soared over the tilted deck and pounced straight for Jiang Chao. Jiang Chao suddenly released his grip on the bone fork. Deprived of opposing force, the burly fish, Folk, stumbled forward. The charging second fish, Folk, could not correct its momentum and crashed heavily into its back. Both monsters tumbled together in a heap. Jiang Chao snatched up his rescue axe and struck the support rope a 3rd time. Crack! Only a few thin strands of fiber still held the rope together. The burly fish, Folk, pushed itself upright. The instant it lifted its head, the blunt rear spike of Jiang Chao's axe smashed into its left eye. Squelch! Its pale gray eyeball burst. The monster unleashed a deafening roar and swept its arm sideways. Jiang Chao ducked the blow and brought the axe down one final time. The support rope snapped completely. Deprived of its main anchorage, the suspension bridge toppled down into the waterway. Planks and fish, Folk, plunged together into the raging current. Half the burly fish, Folk's body rested on the stone bank. As the bridge fell, broken timber jammed tight against its right leg. One hand clawed into rock fissures, holding itself suspended above the rushing tide. Its remaining functional eye locked firmly onto Jiang Chao. Jiang Chao's chest heaved. His right hand tightened around the rescue axe. Behind him came the sound of children crying. If he delayed any longer, More fish, folk would pour forth from deeper within the old docks. Jiang Chao walked toward the bank edge. The burly fish, folk snarled. Suddenly it released its grip on the stone and struck for his ankle. Jiang Chao had anticipated this move. He stepped back half a pace and drove the axe, blade deep into the creature's open gill slits. The first strike sliced through gill membranes. The second hacked clean through internal cartilage. The monster's arm went limp and fell away. The current caught its body and dragged it down beneath the churning surf. Its surviving eye vanished under the waves. A notification flickered across the captain's log. Fog. Gillfish, folk elite sustained severe injury. Target has moved out of detection range. No kill confirmation appeared. The creature might still be alive. Jiang Chao glanced at the wrecked suspension bridge, then turned to pursue the woman and the two children. Behind the stone tablet lay a narrow mountain trail. Tall black, leaf plants lined both sides of the path, their foliage dotted with fine droplets of moisture. Thick fog drifted through the woods, limiting visibility to roughly 10 meters. The woman leaned against a thick tree trunk. Her left leg wound continued to bleed steadily. The two children huddled beside her, faces etched with raw terror. Relief washed over her when she saw Jiang Chao return. She pointed back toward the way they had come, then shook her head forcefully. Returning to the old docks by their original path was impossible now. Jiang Chao understood that perfectly well. The ruined bridge sealed off their old route. The gate of homeward voyage stood on the opposite dock side, and its stability window had less than 40 minutes remaining. He had to find an alternate way back. Jiang Chao knelt down to examine the woman's injury. Beneath her coarse cloth wrapping lay a deep laceration, its edges darkened. Tiny white particles were embedded inside the wound, resembling some kind of insect eggs. The woman noticed his gaze and hastily covered the injury, her expression filled with alarm. Jiang Chao held her wrist firmly. If you want to live, stay still. He could not speak her tongue, yet his tone carried unambiguous meaning. She stiffened for a moment before lowering her hands. Jiang Chao pulled out his portable first aid kit, which he had brought with him after tending his injuries aboard the homeward voyage. Bandages, antiseptic, and tourniquets were in short supply, barely enough to treat one serious external wound. Using tweezers, he plucked out the white particles. The instant each particle cleared the wound, it wriggled frantically at the tip of the tweezers. Text materialized across the captain's log. Fog, gill parasitic eggs. Status, unhatched. Will lose vitality within 10 minutes once removed from host. Jiang Chao dropped the eggs into a small pouch filled with coarse salt. Upon contact with salt grains, the eggs shrank rapidly and dissolved into dark, watery residue. Coarse salt worked against these parasites. Surprise showed on the woman's face as she watched. Jiang Chao removed every last egg fragment, cleaned the wound thoroughly, and wrapped fresh bandages around it. Throughout the whole procedure, the woman bit down hard and did not utter a single cry of pain. The older-looking child watched every movement intently. Once the bandaging was finished, he carefully held out a fragment of pale carved bone. Crudely etched onto its surface was an anchor symbol. Jiang Chao accepted the bone shard. Fish, Bone Tribe Talisman. Possession of this artifact unlocks selected mechanisms within the old harbor. Residual information parsing in progress. The log text paused for several seconds. Homologous anchor mark detected. Jiang Chao's eyes narrowed. Homologous. The anchor carved on this bone fragment bore a striking resemblance to the emblem mounted on the bow of the homeward voyage. The woman pointed at the talisman, then gestured deeper down the mountain trail and spoke another short phrase. This time, fragmented translations appeared from the captain's log. Old, harbor, refuge, passage. She wanted to lead Jiang Chao along an alternate route back to the old docks. Jiang Chao checked the countdown timer. Gate stability remaining, 36 minutes and 18 seconds. 36 minutes. Ordinary walking speed would barely get them there in time. The woman walked with an injured leg, and the two children could not move quickly. Jiang Chao knelt, picked up a stick, and drew the shape of a gateway in the mud, then pointed to himself. The woman stared at the drawing, comprehension slowly dawning across her features. She lifted her head, her expression complex. Home voyage. The translation remained fuzzy, yet Jiang Chao caught those two syllables clearly. She knew of the gate of homeward voyage. She took back the bone talisman and hurried over to a vine-covered rock wall beside the path. She slotted the fish bone talisman into a stone fissure. Click. Mechanisms turned deep within the stone. Vast swathes of vines slid away, revealing a narrow underground passage wide enough for two people to walk side by side. The woman lifted the smaller child and nodded toward the passage. Jiang Chao supported the other boy and stepped inside first. Oil lamps hung at intervals along the tunnel. The woman pulled out flint and struck sparks to light each wick in turn. Warm yellow light chased back the darkness. Murals covered both stone walls. Jiang Chao studied them as he walked. The figures depicted resembled the woman's people, building docks along the seashore, fishing and hauling cargo. Then a massive black egg rose from the seawater. Gill-bearing humanoid monsters crawled out of it. The final panels showed a black sailing ship anchored outside the old harbor. A figure stepped out from its cabin doorway, wielding a long hooked axe. Behind that figure was the identical anchor symbol belonging to the homeward voyage. Jiang Chao slowed his pace. The previous captain of the homeward voyage had once been here. On the very last mural, the axe-wielding figure stood before a gigantic nest. No black ship stood behind him, and no gateway was depicted. The illustration ended there abruptly. Noticing Jiang Chao had stopped, the woman glanced back. She pointed at the mural figure, then at the rescue axe in his hands. Behind Gate, the hunter. For the first time, the captain's log produced a complete, coherent translation. Jiang Chao stared deeper down the tunnel. What became of him? The woman fell silent. First she pointed toward the far end of the passage, then drew her palm slowly across her own throat. The meaning could not have been plainer. He was dead. The sound of running water echoed further ahead. Several minutes later, an iron gate blocked the tunnel's end. The woman pressed the fish-bone talisman against its lock. The heavy iron portal rumbled open. The familiar oil lamps of the old harbor came into view. They had circled past the broken bridge and returned to the area surrounding the gate of homeward voyage. The dark, red wooden gateway still stood at the end of the pier. Only 9 minutes remained of its stable window, yet a corpse now lay just before its threshold. A gill-fish folk lay sprawled there. Its skull had been caved in by blunt force, black blood streaming all the way into the cabin of the homeward voyage. Jiang Chao halted. No body had lain there when he departed. No other person was aboard his ship. The woman suddenly grabbed his sleeve, trembling and pointing toward the gateway interior. From deep within the darkened cabin came slow, heavy footsteps. Thud, thud. With every step, the whole vessel trembled faintly. Scarlet warning text blazed before Jiang Chao's eyes. Warning. An unknown aberrant life form has passed through the gate of homeward voyage. Your vessel is under invasion. Your vessel is under invasion. The scarlet alert hung sharp before his vision. Jiang Chao shifted his rescue axe to his right hand and strode toward the gate of homeward voyage. The injured woman grabbed hold of him. She pointed to herself and then toward the gateway, plainly wishing to follow him inside. Jiang Chao shook his head and gestured for her to keep the two children safely where they stood. Space inside the homeward voyage was cramped. Fighting an intruding abnormal creature while escorting 3 people with limited mobility would only make the situation far more dangerous. The woman tried to speak again, when another heavy impact boomed deep inside the cabin. Boom. The homeward voyage shuddered. It sounded as though something had crashed against a structural bulkhead. Jiang Chao wasted no more time and stepped across the threshold. The damp chill of the old harbor fell away at once. He heard waves lapping against the hull once more. Black blood flowed slowly across the cabin floor. The fish-folk corpse lay by the doorway, its skull thoroughly crushed. Its right hand stretched forward, as if it had tried to crawl back out onto the harbor moments before death. Jiang Chao knelt briefly to inspect it. A square indentation marked the back of its skull. The ship, repair hammer stored in the homeward voyage's warehouse, possessed an exactly square hammer head. The invader had gotten hold of tools aboard his vessel. Thud. Footsteps echoed again, originating from the old storage warehouse. Jiang Chao glanced down the corridor. The warehouse door stood ajar, a distinct outward pressed palm print denting its center. The sleeping quarters appeared untouched. Wet footprints marked the wooden ladder leading up to the deck. The intruder had gone to the deck first, then returned to the warehouse. It was searching for something. Jiang Chao hugged the wall and moved forward cautiously. Pain throbbed fiercely in his left arm. He could barely lift it to chest height. His chest wound, aggravated by all his rushing about, had soaked completely through his bandages. In his current state, a head-on fight would be suicidal. From inside the warehouse came the crash of splintering wooden crates. Crash. Splintered planks flew out through the doorway and struck the corridor walls. Immediately afterward, a massive hand caked in black blood closed around the doorframe. The burly fish-folk bent to step out into the corridor. It was the elite creature swept away from the suspension bridge. Its right leg twisted grotesquely. Where its left eye had been was nothing but a raw bleeding socket. A gash hacked open its gills. It had survived. In its right hand it gripped the ship repair hammer. Slung over its left arm hung a sack filled with fish, folk remains. The intact fog Gil Jiangchao had taken from an earlier foe peeked out from the open bag. This monster had boarded the homeward voyage and been drawn by the scent of its own kind's remains. Most likely the ordinary fish, folk by the doorway had tried to seize those materials and been crushed under the hammer blow. Spotting Jiangchao, the elite fish, folk rumbled a low snarl in its throat. The captain's log displayed new information. Fog, Gil Warlord rank, elite status, critically wounded, blood, loss enfeebled, enraged danger warning, avoid direct blows. Only those few lines were shown. No numerical stats were provided. Jiangchao raised his rescue axe. The fog, Gil Warlord advanced forward on its damaged leg. With every heavy step, its weight pressed the wooden planks slightly downward. The corridor measured less than 2 meters wide. The fish folk's bulky frame nearly filled the passage entirely. This terrain robbed Jiangchao of room to dodge, yet it also limited how broadly the monster could swing its hammer. 4 meters separated them. Suddenly the fish folk hurled the cloth sack straight toward him. Jiangchao twisted aside. The sack slammed against the wall, spilling scales and gill tissue across the floor. The fish folk charged right behind its thrown projectile, swinging the hammer down from overhead. Jiangchao could not retreat further. Behind him stood the gate of homeward voyage, with the woman and children just outside. He advanced half a step, pressing close to the monster, holding his axe, guard above his head. Boom. The repair hammer crashed against the axe handle. Massive force bore the weapon down toward his shoulder. Jiangchao's knees buckled, nearly dropping him to one knee. Scabs covering his palms split open and bled once more. The fish folk lifted its left hand, reaching for his throat. Jiangchao dodged, stepped between its legs, and drove his shoulder hard against its wounded abdomen. The monster swayed. Its injured right leg could not bear the strain, and it stumbled backward one pace. Jiangchao pulled his axe free and drove the sharp rear spike toward its empty left eye socket. The fish folk wrenched its head aside. The spike scraped across its cheek and tore loose a large flake of pale gray scale. The repair hammer swept horizontally. Confined by the narrow corridor, the hammer head slammed against the side wall and lost most of its momentum. Jiangchao ducked under the blow and brought his axe slicing down onto the monster's right leg. The blade bit deep into its twisted knee joint. Black blood sprayed outward. Roaring in agony, the fog Gil Warlord kicked Jiangchao squarely in the chest. He went flying backward, slamming hard against the gate of homeward voyage. The wooden portal shook violently. His chest wound split wide open, every breath sending sharp stabbing pain through his torso. Outside the gateway, he heard the woman shout in alarm. The children began crying. Bracing himself upright on the axe handle, Jiangchao had barely regained his feet when the fish folk closed the distance once more. It gripped the repair hammer with both hands. Unable to swing sideways in the narrow corridor, it lifted the hammer high straight above its head. There would be nowhere for Jiangchao to evade the coming blow. Jiangchao glanced down at the floor. Fish folk remains lay scattered across the planks. The intact fog Gil rested beside the door, still twitching faintly. Nearby sat the pouch of coarse rock salt he had brought from the old harbor. Jiangchao kicked hard against the salt pouch. Its seams split open, and gray, white salt grains slid across the floor toward the fish folk. The fog Gil Warlord paid no mind to his action. The hammer whistled downward. Jiangchao threw himself sharply left. The hammer crashed onto the cabin planks. Crash. 2 wooden boards shattered completely. Jiangchao rolled to the monster's side, grabbed the intact fog Gil organ and ground it straight into the pile of salt. Sizzle. The fog Gil writhed violently, as if alive. Acrid white smoke rose from the salt. The fog Gil Warlord froze mid-motion. Gill slits flared wide along its neck, as if it could feel the destruction inflicted upon a member of its own kind's respiratory tissue. Jiangchao scooped up a handful of salt mixed with dark fluid and hurled it full into the monster's face. Salt poured into the raw, empty eye socket and deep inside its open gill slits. The fish folk screamed in agony. It dropped the repair hammer, clawing at its own neck, and slamming its body repeatedly against the corridor walls. Jiangchao snatched up his rescue axe and charged to its flank. He drove the axe blade deep into its right gill slit. Jiangchao glanced toward the warehouse. The harpoon gun leaned against a wooden crate. Its pressure canister was empty, and the retrieval rope was still attached beneath the barrel. A harpoon remained loaded inside the muzzle. Jiangchao suddenly let go with his right hand. Caught off balance as its full force meant nothing. The gill hunt captain lurched forward. Jiang Chao slipped past its flank into the warehouse and grabbed the harpoon gun. The merman spat out the rescue axe and spun around in pursuit. Jiang Chao gripped the gun firmly with both hands and drove the muzzle forward like a spear. The harpoon tip pierced the bloody hollow of the merman's left eye. Squelch! The entire harpoon sank deep into its skull. The Gill Hunt captain's lunge froze mid-motion. Jiang Chao leaned into the gun, shoving the monster toward the center of the warehouse. It was still alive. It lifted a hand and seized the gun barrel, its 5 fingers tightening steadily. The wooden frame creaked and split. Jiang Chao released the harpoon gun, bent down, and picked up the ship repair hammer lying on the floor. Just as the merman was pulling the harpoon out of its eye socket, Jiang Chao closed in. He swung the hammer hard. Bang! The square head struck the rear end of the harpoon. The harpoon was driven all the way into the merman's cranial cavity. The Gill Hunt captain went rigid. Its hand slipped away from the gun barrel. Jiang Chao pressed his advantage. A second hammer blow landed on the merman's temple. The skull caved inward. At the third strike, the merman lost all strength. Its heavy body crashed into crates and collapsed onto the warehouse floor. Black blood seeped out through gaps between the floorboards. Elite aberrant creature slain. Gill Hunt captain first completion. Shipboard defense homing vessel invasion state lifted leaning on the ship. Repair hammer. Jiang Chao stood gasping for breath. His left arm hung limp at his side, almost numb. System notifications kept popping up. Survival points gained. 50 elite first. Kill reward. Maximum hull durability plus 5 homing vessel current durability. 76 105ths harvestable materials detected. Captain Gill. Membrane. Heavy scales. Bony claws. Fragmented source. Essence crystal. Jiang Chao looked at the merman's chest. Beneath its torn leather armor, a faint dark blue light flickered. He slit open its thoracic cavity with his diving knife and pulled out a fingernail-sized crystal. Fragmented source. Essence crystal residual power left behind upon the death of an elite aberrant creature. No processing facilities available. Cannot be used directly. Warning. Direct ingestion may trigger severe physical corruption. Jiang Chao placed the crystal inside a separate waterproof pouch. Though useless for now, its value was surely higher than ordinary merman materials. Rapid footsteps echoed from outside. The injured woman rushed aboard the homing vessel. She clutched a sharpened shard of bone, and 2 children stayed close on her heels. At the sight of the fallen Gill Hunt captain inside the warehouse, all 3 halted. The woman stared at the monster for a long moment before her tensed shoulders slowly relaxed. She stepped toward Jiang Chao and reached out to support him. Jiang Chao shook his head and nodded toward the doorway. Get inside. Only 3 minutes remained before the gateway stabilization expired. Understanding his warning, the woman led both children fully across the threshold into the cabin of the homing vessel. The captain's log updated instantly. 3 temporary boarders detected. Grant boarding access to the homing vessel. Jiang Chao confirmed authorization. Temporary boarding privileges activated. Current number of people on board, 4. The woman glanced back at the dark, red wooden gate, plainly uneasy. She pointed toward the old dock district and spoke quickly. As their period of contact lengthened, the log's language decryption progress had reached nearly 50%. Fragmentary translations appeared before Jiang Chao's eyes. Gate will open. The tide. Mother will know. She will send more hunt captains. Jiang Chao checked the countdown. 1 minute and 52 seconds. Distant low-pitched horns echoed across the old dock. 1 blast. Then a second. Moments later, dozens of oil lamps flared through thick fog. Tall silhouettes appeared on both sides of the waterway. The merman had discovered the returning gateway. Jiang Chao walked over and grasped the bronze door handle. A fresh operational prompt surfaced in the log. Gateway stabilization period nearing its end. Captain may manually close the gateway ahead of schedule. Upon closure, this gateway will enter sealed, lock state. Available gateway slots remaining, 0/3. Jiang Chao chose to close it. The dark, red wooden door began to swing inward. Through the last narrow gap, mermen could already be seen sprinting down the trestle pier. A bone fork whirled through the fog, flying straight for the doorway. Jiang Chao heaved the door shut. Boom. The gateway slammed fully closed. Just before it sealed, the tip of the bone fork slipped through the gap and embedded itself in the corridor wall, its shaft still trembling violently. The dark, red gate lost its sheen. Surface moisture evaporated rapidly, and the inscription on its nameplate altered. Fogwood Island, Old Dock status. Sealed. Locked exploration progress. 21% conditions for re-opening. Old Dock gateway key. or continental resonance available gateway slots remaining, 1/3. The sound of open, ocean waves filled the air once more. Horn blasts, footsteps, and merman roars from the dock vanished completely. The homing vessel drifted again across silent seas. Huddling beside their mother, the two children stared nervously around the unfamiliar cabin. The woman turned toward Jiang Chao. She raised her right hand and drew an anchor symbol over her chest, then spoke her name in a quiet voice. Saf. The captain's log finished translation. Saf, acolyte of the fish bone tribe. Jiang Chao nodded. Jiang Chao. Saf repeated his name, her pronunciation slightly awkward. Jiang Chao. Her brief relief faded as she looked toward the sealed gate. Many of my people are still trapped inside the old dock. Every 7 days, the tide, mother takes some of them away. Jiang Chao scanned the captain's log. Merman materials, 25 liters of fresh water, coarse salt, fishing nets, waterproof glue, the damaged harpoon gun, together with 3 natives from Fogwood Island. The rewards from this first gateway were substantial, yet they had brought a far more troublesome problem. Though the gate was sealed, the homing vessel's existence had been exposed. The old dock stayed under merman control. Next time the gateway opened, more than one hunt captain would be waiting beyond it. Still, Saf's people knew the waterways, storehouses, and the tide mother's lair. If he intended to fully exploit this gateway, he would have to return sooner or later. While Jiang Chao weighed the risks, Saf pointed at the faded anchor marking on the door panel. She has marked you. Jiang Chao lifted his gaze to her. Who do you mean? Saf spoke softly. The tide mother. When this gate opens again, she will be waiting for you on the other side. The body of the Gill hunt captain lay in the warehouse. Black blood seeped steadily through floor, board gaps, and a heavy metallic stench grew stronger. At the sight of the blood, Saf's face paled. Ignoring her leg injury, she hurried into the warehouse, grabbed handfuls of coarse salt from a sack, and sprinkled them around the corpse. When gray, white salt grains touched the black blood, fine hissing sounds arose. Sizzle. Thread, thin white worms wriggled out of the blood. Jiang Chao crushed one beneath his boot. The captain's log displayed a notice. Gill, bloodworm juvenile parasitic organism, can survive 6 hours in damp conditions after leaving merman blood parasite risk upon contact with open wounds. Jiang Chao glanced at his own newly reopened chest wound and stepped hastily backward. Saf gestured toward the coarse salt and the blood-stained planks. Salt. Everything must be cleaned. Language decryption had surpassed 50%. Short, simple sentences could be understood reliably, though complex speech still suffered gaps in translation. Jiang Chao fetched a wooden bucket, poured in seawater, and added coarse salt plus ash found beside the old, dock waterproof, glue canisters. Saf took the bucket and scrubbed the blood-soaked floorboards with a tattered cloth. The two children tried to help, but a sharp look from her sent them retreating to the entrance of the rest quarters. Jiang Chao treated his injuries first. His waterproof suit had been sliced open across the chest, and bandages were soaked with blood. Traces of merman black blood coated the edges of his wound, yet no white worms were visible for the moment. He rinsed thoroughly with antiseptic solution and fastened fresh bandages tightly. His left arm had swollen further. Sharp pain flared with every lift, though the bones appeared unbroken. Still, he could not endure another close quarters fight like the last one anytime soon. After putting away medical supplies, Jiang Chao began harvesting materials from the merman corpse. The Gill hunt captain possessed gills larger than ordinary mermans, darker in color. Heavy scales clustered across its shoulders and chest, too tough for the diving knife to slice through easily. Saf pulled a curved bone knife from the merman's waist. She slipped the blade under scale edges and cut neatly along their grain. One whole heavy scale peeled free. Her movements showed clear familiarity with this work. Jiang Chao looked at her. Has your tribe hunted merman before? Saf shook her head. She pointed to her wounded leg, then back to the dead hunt captain. The fish-bone tribe used to hunt them. Then mermen grew too numerous. Everyone who could fight them perished. As she spoke, the two children stared at the corpse. The older boy bit his lip, hatred burning in his eyes. Noticing his gaze, Saf held out the bone knife toward him. Stunned, the boy accepted it with both hands. Tarn. Saf gestured at the boy for Jiang Chao's benefit, then pointed at the girl hiding behind him. Rhea. Tarn was roughly 11 or 12 years old. Rhea appeared no older than 7, constantly clutching a small wooden plaque carved with fish bone patterns. Their garments were thin and ragged. Faint marks around their wrists and ankles testified to long-term confinement and shackles. Jiang Chao nodded. Go and rest for a while. Tarn merely stared down at the bone knife, then back toward the hunt, captain's body. Saf said a few quick phrases in her tribal tongue. Tarn fell silent for a moment, walked over to the corpse, and began cutting the webbing on its legs following Saf's earlier example. His small hands trembled, yet his grip stayed firm. Jiang Chao understood Saf's intention. If the two children hoped to survive these dangerous seas, sooner or later they would have to face monsters themselves. 1 hour later, corpse harvesting was complete. Gil, Captain Gil. Membrane times 1 obtained intact heavy scales times 18 obtained bony claws times 6 obtained merman webbing times 4 obtained corrupted sinew times 2 obtained fragmented source, essence crystal times 1 obtained. Remaining flesh held no practical value. From the 18 heavy scales, Saf selected 4 smaller ones, plus 2 pieces of webbing and 1 strip of corrupted sinew. Jiang Chao watched her. What are you making? Something useful for you. Saf glanced at the rope, burn wounds across his palms. The webbing had been repeatedly cleansed with coarse salt to remove most slime. She cut the webbing into narrow strips, layered heavy scales along the outer surface, and bound everything tightly using fine threads torn from corrupted sinew. Tarn pulled bindings taut. Jiang Chao contributed copper wire salvaged from a sunken ship supply crate to reinforce high-stress joints. Nearly an hour passed before a crudely crafted pair of bracers was finished. Saf tossed 1 bracer to Jiang Chao. Keep open wounds from touching the inner lining. Jiang Chao slipped it on. The webbing conformed snugly to his wrists, heavy scales shielding the outer side of his forearms. When he wiggled his fingers, his soapy palms gained noticeably better traction. The captain's log finished item identification. Gil, scale bracer quality. Common constitution bonus. +1 grip stability +15% in damp environments durability. 18-20 material corruption, not fully purged prolonged, wherewith open skin wounds may cause corruption build up. Jiang Chao opened his personal status panel. A pale, colored bonus entry appeared beside his constitution stat. Equipment bonus. Gil, scale bracer. Constitution +1. When he removed the bracer, the bonus vanished instantly. Once he put it back on, the bonus reappeared. Saf smeared coarse salt over the merman's chest and sliced open a black internal sac. Acrid gas billowed out, and the corpse rapidly shriveled. This way, when we throw it overboard, blood, worms cannot follow us. Together with Tarn, Jiang Chao dragged the corpse up onto the deck. The sea stretched black all around. Distant waves murmured. No lights from other ships were visible. Jiang Chao pushed the shriveled body over the rail. Splash! It floated briefly on the surface, drifting away with the current. A dozen seconds later, a massive shadow stirred beneath the water. The merman corpse sank abruptly. White foam churned across the waves. The body disappeared, and the huge shadow dived back into deep water. Saf stepped hastily backward. Jiang Chao closed the deck hatch and dimmed all ship lanterns. Whatever had taken the corpse was enormous. Fortunately, it showed no immediate interest in the homing vessel. By the time cabin cleaning was done, pale gray dawn tinted the horizon. The homing vessel drifted slowly across windless waters. Jiang Chao inventoried supplies again. 15 liters of potable water remained, plus 4 liters requiring purification. 4.5 black ride biscuits were left, a sack of coarse salt, 1 salvaged old dock fishing net, 2 cans of waterproof glue, 8 units of timber, and more than 20 iron nails. The harpoon gun barrel was cracked, its pressure canister completely spent. His red-handled rescue axe bore several nicks on its blade, but remained usable for the time being. For people dependent on these stocks, water was sufficient for now, yet food would run out within days. Saf and the 2 children were physically weakened by long imprisonment inside the old dock. Rhea ate half a black ride biscuit, the best meal she had had in a very long time. Only 3 biscuits remained afterward. Jiang Chao stood in the warehouse doorway, staring silently at the supplies. The regional sea chat channel grew busy again. Dawn broke. I made it through the night. How many people died last night? A ship right beside me sank. The sea is covered with driftwood. Anyone want to team up? No one can survive alone out here. I fished up a crate of ration bars. Trading for fresh water, in-person meeting only. In-person trade? No way I dare show myself. Jiang Chao looked at the top, right corner of the log. 7th Initial Sea Zone. Current survivors 887905. More than 3,000 lives had been lost overnight, and the number kept slowly falling. Jiang Chao closed the chat channel and hauled the damaged old dock fishing net onto deck. Several large rips marred its weave. He took apart other salvaged broken nets and prepared cordage for repairs. Saf watched for a while, then took the cordage from his hands. Her fingers moved swiftly among net meshes. tying unfamiliar knots. The knots tightened under water tension and distributed force across surrounding mesh points. Saf nodded toward the sea. Ordinary fish, hooks won't work here. Sea creatures bite straight through lines. She pointed to the repaired net. Use nets. Do not lower them too deep. Something dangerous lurks down below. Jiang Chao left net, repair work to her, and walked over to the starboard gunwale. Planks patched the previous night had loosened once more. The homing vessel held 76 durability points, with its maximum capacity raised to 105. The ship was still far from secure. The basic hull repair blueprint required 10 timber units. 2 more were still needed. Jiang Chao raised his spyglass and scanned surrounding waters. With dawn, fog had thinned considerably. 200 meters away, a wreckage raft drifted with the current, secured with sealed wooden chests. A corpse lay draped over its edge. Judging by its clothing, the body came from Earth. Its back faced the homing vessel, so the cause of death could not be seen. Every day, countless people perished across this sea. Their abandoned ships and supplies drifted onward to become resources for survivors. Jiang Chao lowered the spyglass and hoisted half sail. Carried by faint breezes, the homing vessel drew slowly nearer. 50 meters from the raft, Saf suddenly grabbed his arm. Stop! Her eyes locked onto the corpse's exposed right hand. Its 5 fingers flexed faintly with each swell of the waves. Jiang Chao immediately lowered the sail. The homing vessel slowed. The corpse stayed draped over the raft edge. Its hand continued twitching with wave motion. After observing for a short while, Jiang Chao picked up a wood fragment and tossed it close beside the corpse. The wood hit the water. The figure sprawled across the raft snapped its head upward. A pale gray tongue shot out, seized the fragment, and dragged it into its mouth. Crunch. Wood was chewed to splinters. Though still wearing human clothes, its face was swollen and distorted. Milky white film covered its eyes. Circular suction pads dotted its neck, and its body was physically fused to some large, soft-bodied creature beneath the raft. The captain's log displayed a notification. Unknown parasitic creature detected. Threat level, unassessed. Jiang Chao's gaze lingered on the raft. 2 sealed chests rested atop it alongside several intact planks. Exactly the hull repair materials he needed. Still, he refused to bring the homing vessel any closer. His harpoon gun was broken, and signal flares were exhausted. Getting within close range of an unknown monster carried unacceptable risk. Once Saf finished mending the fishing net, she tied one end to floating buoys and secured the other to the ship's stern. Jiang Chao understood her plan. Together they cast the net overboard and steered the homing vessel in a wide loop around the raft. The net arced across the sea surface and wrapped around from the raft's far side. Alerted by the approaching vessel, the parasitic creature crawled across the raft, its lower body still attached to the huge, flat, gray, soft-bodied beast. It opened its mouth and let out garbled cries. Help, help me. Both Tarn and Rhea turned pale with fright. Gripping his rescue axe, Jiang Chao ignored the plea. He kept steering in a wide arc. The net was hauled tight, drawing the raft toward the homing vessel. Provoked, the parasite jumped into seawater and scrambled up along net ropes. Jiang Chao looped the haul rope around deck bollards. Once the parasite drew within 10-meter range, he released one side of the securing knots. The net lost its balance, tipping the raft over. The 2 sealed chests and intact planks spilled into the water, and the parasitic creature was pinned. Jiang Chao quickly drew in the opposite rope, pulling loose planks and chests toward his ship. Heavy impacts echoed underwater as the parasite tore at the netting. Saf severed the main rope connecting to the raft. Carried away by currents, the raft and its attached parasite drifted off into the distance. Half of the salvaged fishing net was destroyed. 2 sealed chests and 6 intact planks were safely pulled alongside the homing vessel. Basic timber times 6 gained. Sealed supply crate times 2 gained. 1 crate held 8 ration bars plus 3 bottles of drinking water. Inside the second lay 2 short-handled hammers, a roll of copper wire, and a small pouch of metal fittings. Tarn swallowed hard at the sight of ration bars. Rhea clung tightly to Saf's clothing, unable to look away from the containers. The immediate food crisis had eased. Jiang Chao took out 10 timber units, 20 iron nails, and 1 can of waterproof glue. Light emanated from the basic hull repair blueprint. Following markings shown in the log, he pried loose damaged planks and fitted new reinforcing frames. Saf spread waterproof glue across seams. Tarn handed over nails and tools. Rhea followed behind all 3, carrying a wooden bowl filled with nails. They labored through the entire morning until starboard repairs were finished. New planks varied in shade, yet structural integrity was greatly improved. Basic hull repair completed. Homing vessel durability, 91/105. Starboard gunwale receives temporary reinforcement. Effect duration, 7 days. As the final nail was hammered home, waterproof sealant solidified gradually within all seams. The mismatched repair planks on the homing vessel's starboard side formed one continuous solid surface. Fresh text appeared in the captain's log. Basic hull repair completed. Homing vessel current durability, 91/105. First completion of structural hull repair. Hull durability satisfies vessel advancement prerequisites. Shipboard defense record requirement fulfilled. Homing vessel meets conditions for Tier 2 vessel advancement. Proceed with ship core advancement. Jiang Chao set down his hammer. Advance. As the words left his mouth, the deck beneath his feet shook violently. Deep inside the homebound, a low groan of compressing timber echoed out. The sound was not deafening, yet the whole ship felt as though it were stretching after a long slumber. The old planks along the gunwales thickened. Rusty nails sticking out were gradually covered by newly grown wood grain. The keel along the bottom extended a short distance forward. The starboard hull that Jiang Chao had just repaired also underwent transformation. Temporary reinforcing structures fused back into the main body of the vessel, and color differences between timbers slowly faded. Reinforcement that was only meant to last 7 days became permanently solidified by the ship core. The inner wall of the old storage hold retreated half a meter backwards. A narrow wall-mounted wooden bunk appeared inside the quarters. The sea rolled gently, and the homebound's draft stabilized once more. The whole process lasted just over 2 minutes. The captain's log updated automatically. Homebound advancement complete. Ship level, 1-2. Maximum durability, 105/115. Current durability, 91/101. Base sailing speed, 4 knots 4.5 knots. Maximum cargo capacity, 30-35. Maximum crew quota, 5-6. Unlocked basic refit slot, 1. Temporary starboard reinforcement converted to permanent structure. Jiang Chao reopened the ship status panel. Homebound. Level, 2. Durability, 101/115. Base sailing speed, 4.5 knots. Cargo load. Current supplies nearly hit capacity. Crew for 6ths. Available zones. Deck, wheelhouse, old storage hold, living quarters. Basic refit slot. 1. Installed modules, none. Unique trait, myriad world hold. The homebound still looked run down. Peeling paint marred its hull, and sails bore countless patch-up marks. Standing on deck, however, Jiang Chao could clearly feel the difference. The ship moved far more steadily beneath his feet. The wheel turned with greater ease. The gunwales could now better withstand pounding ocean waves. From this moment onward, the homebound was no longer a rickety wreck on the verge of falling apart. Saf tapped newly formed planks with her knuckles and offered her first smile of the long night. Jiang Chao stowed his tools and glanced toward the 3 people standing on deck. Though the ship remained battered, 3 more mouths now needed food and fresh water. Still, these companions knew how to process merman materials, mend fishing nets, and were familiar with Mistwood Island. The sun sank slowly toward the sea. Before nightfall, Saf caught 7 silvery gray fish with leftover netting. She slit open each belly, pulled out transparent sacks, and cleaned the flesh with coarse salt. For the first time, the 4 of them shared a warm meal. That night, the number of survivors across the sea dropped far more slowly than the day before. Those still alive had begun adapting to these bizarre waters. 5 minutes before midnight, Jiang Chao walked down the lower corridor. The dark red wharf door remained sealed shut. It occupied the entire left-hand wall. The wall opposite stood bare. Midnight arrived. A faint tremor ran through the homebound's interior. Cracks spread slowly across the right side wall. A new doorframe grew out from wooden planks bit by bit. This second door was noticeably smaller than the old wharf door. Most of its white paint had flaked away, and a rusted iron tag hung from its handle. Second gate generated. Type, resource gate. Location, sunken ship galley. Danger level, low. Remaining gate slots, February 3rd. Rich aromas of cooked food drifted out through the cracks. Inside the living quarters, Tarn and Rhea both lifted their heads. Saf stepped up behind Jiang Chao. Small lines of text materialized beneath the metal tag. Warning, this zone is steadily flooding. Estimated total submersion, 40 minutes. Jiang Chao wrapped his hand around the doorknob. Rapid banging echoed from behind the door. Bang, bang, bang. A man shouted from the other side. Is anybody out there? Don't open it yet. That pot in the galley, it just moved. Jiang Chao kept hold of the handle without pushing open the door at once. Rich broth-like steam seeped through gaps, mixed with faint fumes of gas and seawater. The countdown on the captain's log kept ticking down. Time until full zone submersion, 39 minutes, 21 seconds. Who are you? Jiang Chao called. Liang Qua. I'm alive, the man answered quickly. That pot just swallowed a kitchen cleaver. Stay well clear of the stove once you open up. Jiang Chao let go of the knob. He grabbed his rescue axe and slung his damaged harpoon gun over one shoulder. Saf had moved to stand beside him. Her leg wound had been freshly dressed, yet walking still caused her pain. Stay aboard, Jiang Chao told her. He nodded toward Tarn and Rhea. The sealed old wharf door still existed deep within the homebound. No one could guarantee Merman would not find some way to unlock it again. Saf understood his reasoning. She drew her bone dagger from her waist and held it out to him. When dealing with aquatic creatures, watch their mouths first. Many monsters have soft inner mouths. Jiang Chao took the dagger and tucked it into his belt. Keep this door secured. He pressed down the handle and shoved the white wooden door wide open. Seawater surged outward. Jiang Chao dodged sideways. The rushing current carried plates, spice bottles, and pale potatoes, spilling across the wooden corridor floor of the homebound. Beyond the doorway lay a heavily tilted galley. The ceiling slanted sharply rightwards. Countertops bolted to the floor sat at steep angles. Seawater poured nonstop through a fractured porthole at the far end, already ankle-deep across the floor. Dim yellow emergency lamps flickered. A row of stoves lined the left wall. One half-man-tall stew pot remained covered under its heavy iron lid. The lid thumped rhythmically upward. Thunk, thunk. Every impact sent thin, wispy plumes of white steam curling out around the rim. A stocky man crouched by the cold storage chamber door, gripping a mop handle tightly in both hands. His gaze fixed warily on the pot. Around 40 years old, he wore a dark blue chef's jacket. A cut ran above his left eyebrow, and flour dusted his cheeks. Where did you come through? Liang Qua's eyes traveled past Jiang Chao toward the cabins of the homebound, his expression stunned. That space should just be a storage hold. Let's handle the pot first. Jiang Chao stepped over the threshold, his boots sinking into cold seawater. The log immediately updated. Sunken ship galley exploration progress, 1%. Remaining zone stability, 38 minutes 46 seconds. Liang Qua knew now was no time for questions. He lowered his voice. This ship was cooking dinner right before it sank. When I got in here, the stove was still burning and meat simmered inside that pot. The hull lurched. I tried to turn off the fire, and then something inside dragged a soup spoon straight in. He gestured toward the floor. A broken long-handled soup spoon rested under the stove. Fine tooth marks scored its jagged metal fracture. Jiang Chao advanced alongside the counter. The stewpot lid pounded faster. Thunk, thunk, thunk. The stove fire had long gone cold, yet steam kept billowing out of the pot. No monster information showed on the captain's log. System scanning could not penetrate the thick metal walls. Jiang Chao picked up an iron plate off the floor and hurled it beside the stewpot. Clang. As the plate clattered down, impacts from inside the pot instantly ceased. 2 full seconds of silence hung over the galley. The iron lid lifted open a narrow gap. A red-black tentacle shot out, coiled tight around the iron plate lying on the floor. It snapped backward, hauling the plate inside the pot. Crunching, chewing noises echoed. Liang Qua's face paled. I told you it eats metal blades, didn't I? Hard to deny the evidence. Jiang Chao kept his eyes locked on the pot rim. It reacts to loud noise. The stewpot sat fixed onto its stove. Circling around it was possible, yet supplies in this galley were limited. Leaving the monster unchecked meant constant risk of ambush while moving cargo. In 40 minutes, this entire area would vanish beneath the waves. If they retreated right now, they gained nothing. Jiang Chao lifted his rescue axe and pointed toward the cold storage chamber. Is it still operational? Yes, Liang Qua replied quickly. Power still runs, temperature stays freezing. Frozen meat, vegetables, sacks of flour, enough food to sustain people for a long time. Debris wedged the door shut. I cannot shift all that weight by myself. Jiang Chao scanned the galley layout. The cold storage chamber stood roughly 8 meters away from the stewpot. Overturned metal cabinets littered the space in between. To reach it meant passing directly in front of the stove. Does whatever is inside that pot fear freezing temperatures? How would I know? Liang Qua paused, catching on. You want to lure it into cold storage? Worth trying. Neither wasted more breath on discussion. Liang Qua led Jiang Chao to the cold storage entrance. A heavy work counter had toppled against the doorway. Pots, pans, and supply crates lay crushed underneath. Once the vessel tilted, most of the counter's weight jammed the frame shut. Jiang Chao's left arm still lacked full strength. He jammed the rescue axe underneath the countertop and leveraged the axe handle as a pry bar. I count to 3. Liang Qua braced himself on the opposite side. 1. Both men pushed hard. The counter lifted a few centimeters off the floor. Liang Kuo kicked metal boxes out from underneath, while Jiang Chao shifted the angle of his axe handle. Again, the heavy work surface scraped slowly across the floor and crashed down. Most debris blocking the cold storage door had been cleared away. Liang Kuo hauled the door open. Frigid white vapor billowed outward. Boxes, meat racks, and sealed food barrels filled the space. Rows of rock-hard frozen carcasses hung deep inside. Edible resources detected. Frozen meat, 180 kg. Vegetables, 45 kg. Flour grains, 90 kg. Miscellaneous condiments, awaiting inventory. Jiang Chao studied the stockpile. There was plenty, yet the homebound possessed limited cargo capacity. They could never carry everything away. Frozen meat would spoil quickly once removed from refrigeration. Supplies needed prioritizing. Grains, seasonings, canned goods, and kitchen tools should go back first. Liang Kuo understood perfectly well. He wheeled out a service trolley from cold storage and stacked 2 sacks of flour, several crates of dried goods, and cooking oil onto it. Canned goods in the corner, grab those first. Just 2 crates of frozen meat. Without refrigeration aboard my craft, most will simply rot in seawater. Jiang Chao gave him a glance. You own a ship? Liang Kuo's movements faltered for a split second. I do. That's excellent news. I found this sunken wreck hoping to scavenge food. Right after I climbed into the galley, the hull started sinking fast and sealed my original exit off. Where is your vessel? Beneath this galley. Liang Kuo nodded toward rising seawater. My metal skiff is moored outside the wreck with rope. Reach the stern and I can get back to it. He asked nothing about where Jiang Chao had come from or where the homebound sat. Jiang Chao likewise avoided pressing for details about Liang Kuo's boat. To survive the first night in these strange seas and dare scavenge sunken wrecks meant Liang Kuo was cautious by nature. Working side by side, they rolled out 3 fully loaded service trolleys. Obtain canned luncheon meat times 24, obtain rolled oats times 15 kg, obtain flour times 30 kg, obtain cooking oil times 8L, obtain salt times 5 kg, obtain frozen meat times 20 kg, obtain complete kitchen knife set, obtain portable gas canisters times 4. Cargo load aboard the homebound climbed rapidly. In a corner of cold storage, Jiang Chao also found a repair kit stuffed full of rubber spare parts. Air, tight gaskets, copper valves, and heavy-duty flexible hoses, including exactly the broken gasket his harpoon gun required. This scavenge run had already yielded substantial gains. Once more the stew pot began thumping. Thunk! This blow rang far louder. The lid bounced upwards over a dozen centimeters. Red, black tentacles crept over the rim, covered in tiny suction cups, drawn toward the scent drifting off frozen meat. Liang Kuo pushed the final crate of tins onto a trolley. We've secured supplies. Let's get out of here. Jiang Chao looked toward the portal. To travel from cold storage back to the homebound's gateway meant passing straight in front of the stew pot. Heavy trolleys moved sluggishly. Halfway across the room, whatever lurked in the pot would undoubtedly strike. Take the frozen meat out. Liang Kuo frowned. Are you seriously going to feed it? Draw it out of the pot first. Jiang Chao dragged over the crate, holding frozen meat. He tied a large chunk of frozen beef with rope and tossed it carefully onto the floor close beside the stove. As frozen meat landed, complete silence fell over the pot. Red, black tentacles poked out and waved through the air. The iron lid flew fully off. A glutinous mass of fused cooked-looking flesh oozed out of the stew pot. Its body resembled clumps of half-boiled meat stuck together, dotted all over with small gaping mouths. Dozens of thin tentacles braced against the stove, pulling its bulk forward toward the frozen beef. Aberrant creature detected. Heat, devouring flesh leech. Tier, wanderer, class, status, starving, traits, consumes warm objects, highly vulnerable to low temperatures. The monster wrapped itself around the frozen beef. Countless tiny teeth gnawed continuously. Its movements visibly slowed. Sections touching the frozen meat whitened, and tentacles stiffened. Push the trolleys. Jiang Chao shouted. Liang Kuo immediately pushed all 3 service trolleys across the slanting floor toward the portal leading to the homebound. Metal wheels clattered non-stop. The heat, devouring flesh leech lifted its bulk. Spurred by noise, several tentacles abandoned the frozen meat and lashed toward the trolleys. Jiang Chao stood at the rear, firmly gripping his rescue axe. The first tentacle swept toward him. He brought the axe crashing down, slicing halfway through its soft tissue. The tentacle did not sever completely. Tiny sprouts of flesh grew out along the wound, creeping along the axe, head toward Jiang Chao's wrist. He pulled his axe free sharply. A second tentacle coiled tight around the rear wheel of one trolley. Liang Kuo pushed the front two trolleys onward and yelled over his shoulder. "It's tipping over." Jiang Chao drew S. Foosbone dagger from his belt and stabbed down across the tentacle's suction cups. One after another the suction cups ruptured. The tentacle recoiled in agony. Jiang Chao kicked hard against the trolley rear, sending it rolling forward again. Abandoning the beef, the heat, devouring flesh leech slid its full weight off the stove and scuttled toward Jiang Chao. Seawater in the galley now reached calf deep. Submerged, the monster expanded, nearly doubling its apparent volume. Every mouth on its body gaped open. Dark broth, tainted water dripped from them. Jiang Chao spun and sprinted toward cold storage. Seeing him change direction, Liang Kuo halted. "The exit lies the other way. Get those supplies through." Jiang Chao swung his axe and smashed a coolant pipe beside the cold storage doorway. The pipe burst open. Super, chilled fluid for refrigeration sprayed outward, spreading a thin layer of white frost across the floor. The heat, devouring flesh leech charged straight into the cold mist. Its foremost tentacles stiffened instantly. The monster halted and recoiled backward. Jiang Chao grabbed the crate of frozen meat and tossed remaining chunks deep into cold storage. Scent lured the monster, yet it hesitated only briefly. Jiang Chao seized an iron plate off the ground and hurled it deep inside the refrigerated chamber. Clang! Noise echoed from within. Driven by sound stimulus, dozens of tentacles twisted inward, and the monster surged through the doorway. Jiang Chao stood by the cold storage entrance. The instant most of its bulk crossed the threshold, he kicked the heavy door hard. Bang! The door slammed against the creature. Several tentacles jammed in the gap, thrashing wildly. Jiang Chao braced his whole shoulder against the panel. Sharp tearing pain shot through his left arm. Still, the door could not fully close. The monster's main body threw itself against the inner side. "Catch!" Liang Kuo's voice called from behind. A metal locking bar slid across the floor toward him. Having already rolled all three trolleys safely onto the homebound, he had run back to give aid. Liang Kuo pressed his full weight onto the cold storage door alongside Jiang Chao. Together they forced the gap narrower. Tentacles trapped in the opening whitened under compression. Jiang Chao raised his rescue axe and chopped cleanly through each protruding tentacle one by one. When the last piece fell away, the door slammed fully shut. Liang Kuo slid the metal locking bar home into its bolt hole. Click! Violent impacts shook the door from inside. Frost seeped out around the edges. Heat, devouring flesh leech placed into cryogenic hibernation. Sunken ship galley exploration progress, 37%. Liang Kuo gasped for breath and looked over to Jiang Chao. "Scavenging food sure is hell of a chore. Still, we struck lucky, loads of supplies." Jiang Chao glanced back to the countdown. Time until full zone submersion, 17 minutes 8 seconds. Seawater inside the galley rose close to knee depth. Cracking sounds reverberated deep within the wreck, and the whole galley lurched sharply rightwards. Stoves bolted to flooring tore free of several mounting screws. "The ship keeps sinking." Liang Kuo held himself steady against a wall. "I need to reach the stern. Can your metal skiff still operate? If its ship core remains intact, it should work." Liang Kuo took a boning knife from the counter and slung a waterproof backpack stuffed with tins over his shoulders. He glanced toward the portal linking to the homebound. "I could cross onto your ship. That would be a way to survive. But my boat is still out there. If I abandon it, I will have no choice but to rely entirely on you." Liang Kuo spoke plainly. He refused to surrender all his options and fate to a stranger he had only just met. Jiang Chao nodded. "How do I reach the stern?" Liang Kuo pointed toward staff passageways underneath the galley. "Go through storage holds, then descend 2 decks. Water is already flooding those levels." He paused briefly and kept talking. "There is another cold storage hold further down. Its supplies dwarf everything we found up here. The ship is sinking this fast largely because of whatever dwells on that level." "What do you mean?" Liang Kuo walked to the broken porthole and wiped condensation off glass. Outside lay total blackness. One colossal black appendage slowly dragged across the hull surface, scarred all over with circular marks resembling suction cup impressions. It stretched downward toward the sunken ship's bottom, vanishing out of sight. "This wreck is not sinking of its own accord." Liang Kuo lowered his voice. "Something is dragging it down." Another violent tremor shook the sunken vessel. A deep, resonant heartbeat boomed from levels beneath the galley. Thud! Emergency lights along the lower cold storage deck flickered to life, one after another. Fresh text popped up on the captain's log. "High value resource zone detected. Location, lower cold storage deck. Large unknown life. Sign detected. Revised estimate for complete wreck submersion. Remaining time, 11 minutes, 42 seconds. Jiang Chao grabbed hold of the handle of the last supply cart. Liang Qua, how much longer can your boat hold together? The ship core is intact, and the hull hasn't breached. Liang Qua glanced toward the lower passageway. If I can get to the stern and untie the mooring ropes, I can get away. Jiang Chao's gaze swept over the homecoming gate behind the door. Canned food, grain, cooking oil and gas canisters had already been moved inside. The base reward for this run was already secured. This was the perfect moment to fall back. But if they pressed deeper, they might salvage a seaworthy vessel and rescue another survivor familiar with food, processing, and refrigeration gear. Someone they could communicate with. The waters beyond held all manner of unknown dangers. Having an additional ally vessel they could contact was far more valuable than hauling a couple extra crates of frozen meat. Jiang Chao lifted his hand. 7 minutes. If we can't reach your boat within 7 minutes, we turn back immediately. Liang Quan nodded firmly. That's enough. The two men pushed the final supply cart through the homecoming gate. Jiang Chao looked back at Saf, pointed toward the door, then made a closing motion across his chest. If there are 3 minutes left, seal the door right away. Saf frowned. She understood the perils down below, yet she nodded her assent. Jiang Chao checked his gear. A rescue axe, a bone knife, 20 meters of hemp rope, 2 waterproof lamps. He pulled a carbon dioxide fire extinguisher off the kitchen wall and slung it over his back. Liang Qua grabbed a heavy, bladed cleaver. Which way? The staff passage. Liang Qua sprinted through the narrow doorway beside the cold storage room. Beyond lay a sloping metal corridor. Seawater surged upward over the steps, every tread slick with oil. Emergency lights flickered on and off, and peeling evacuation signs clung to the walls. Holding onto the railings, they hurried downward. The ship shuddered every few seconds. That massive creature out in the open sea was dragging the wreckage toward greater depths. By the second deck, seawater reached their waists. Liang Qua stopped before a warped fire-proof door. The metal panel bulged outward from brute force, water steadily seeping through its cracks. The cold storage bay is on the other side. Jiang Chao checked the time. Time remaining, 8 minutes 56 seconds. How long to go around? At least 5 minutes. Then we forced the door. Jiang jammed the tip of his rescue axe into the door gap. The moment he strained with his left arm, searing pain shot through his shoulder. He shifted all his weight onto his right hand against the axe handle. Liang Qua wedged the cleaver into the opposite crevice, and both pried outward at once. The metal screeched in protest as the gap widened little by little. Liang Qua kicked hard against the center of the door. Boom. The fire-proof door swung inward. A flood of seawater crashed straight toward them. Jiang Chao clutched a wall handrail, while Liang Qua was thrown 3 steps backward by the current. The cold storage bay lay in total disarray. Rows of shelving had toppled under water, torn, open food packages floated across the surface, and round metal canisters clattered back and forth. A several-meter-long gash split the outer hull at the far end of the compartment. A black appendage snaked in through the breach. Thicker than an adult human waist, scaleless, ringed with dark, red suckers lined with tiny sharp teeth at each center. The appendage coiled around a load-bearing beam, pulling slowly outward. This monster was what was dragging the wreck down. Lines of text flickered across the captain's log. Large anomalous creature appendage detected. Main body situated outside the hull. Insufficient data available. The stern passage is blocked by it. Liang Qua stared at the breach. The doorway leading to the stern lay directly behind that appendage. To get past, they had to make it release the support beam. Jiang Chao glanced upward toward the bay ceiling. 2 thick silver pipes ran along the overhead, leading straight to the refrigeration unit near the hull breach. One pipe was fractured, coated in thick frost. Is the cold storage unit still running? The backup system is still active. Liang Qua looked upward. But it won't last more than a few minutes. Jiang Chao unslung the fire extinguisher and handed it over. When I hack open the pipe, spray its suckers. Liang Qua took the extinguisher, his expression tightening. If that pipe bursts, seawater will flood straight inside. Which is why we have to move fast. Jiang Chao waded toward the refrigeration unit. Sensing shifting currents, the appendage splayed its suckers open. Click, click, click. Hundreds of fine teeth grated together, like countless insects gnawing glass. Jiang Chao tied one end of the hemp rope around his waist and passed the other to Liang Qua. If I get seized, pull me free. Your injured shoulder, can you handle this? I can swing one axe blow. Jiang Chao stepped onto a collapsed shelf. It swayed gently beneath the water. He shuffled forward, less than a meter away from the frosted pipe. The black appendage suddenly uncoiled. Dozens of suckers swept across the water toward Jiang Chao's calves. Jiang Chao swung the axe preemptively. The blade bit into the foremost sucker. Splat! Dark, red mucus sprayed out. Tiny teeth clamped onto the axe blade, and the whole appendage snapped backward violently. Jiang Chao lost his balance and dropped to one knee in the seawater. The rope around his waist snapped taut instantly. Liang Kuo braced his shoulder against the doorframe and hauled. Hurry! Jiang Chao surged forward, his right hand seizing the frosted pipe. Biting cold seeped quickly through his gloves. He raised the rescue axe and struck hard at the pipe joint. Clang! Only a deep dent appeared. The black appendage lashed toward him again. Planting his foot firmly on the shelf, Jiang Chao delivered a second powerful strike. Crack! The metal pipe split open. Thick white cold mist billowed outward. Temperatures inside the bay plummeted. Where the cold mist struck the appendage, thin ice formed immediately across its surface. Its suckers contracted spasmodically. Liang Kuo tore out the safety pin on the extinguisher, rushed behind Jiang Chao, and aimed the nozzle toward the breach. Hiss! Dense white fog blasted into the sucker openings. The appendage convulsed violently, unwinding ring by ring from the load-bearing beam. A deep, rumbling roar echoed from outside the hull. Muffled by seawater and steel, it reverberated inside the hold, making both men's ears ache. Fall back! Jiang Chao grabbed Liang Kuo by the shoulder and lunged toward the doorway. A split second later, the appendage released the beam completely. Water roared through the hull breach. Overturned shells were tossed by the flood and slammed against compartment walls. The current swept Jiang Chao and Liang Kuo back through the fire-proof doorway. No sooner had they regained their footing than the black appendage whipped out of the cold mist and smashed hard against the doorframe. Boom! An entire section of wall caved inward. Liang Kuo spun and pulled the emergency isolation lever beside him. The fire-proof door began to glide shut. The appendage struck once more. Jiang Chao seized the manual handwheel beside the door, spinning it together with Liang Kuo. The gap narrowed steadily. A final segment of the appendage jammed in the closing opening. Suckers flaring and reaching toward them. Jiang Chao drew the bone knife Saf had given him and slashed hard across its ice-crusted skin. The blade sheared through frost and sank into dark, red flesh. The appendage snapped backward and retreated. The fire-proof door slammed fully shut. Both men slumped against the wall, gasping for breath. Large anomalous creature appendage has withdrawn from this compartment. Rate of wreck submersion temporarily reduced. Estimated total submersion time, 6 minutes, 34 seconds. Jiang Chao put away his bone knife. Where is your boat? Ahead. To the right of the fire-proof door lay a narrow passage previously blocked by the appendage. They pressed onward through chest-deep seawater. All illumination in the stern section had died. Beams from their waterproof lamps traced claw marks running down the walls. The black appendage had lingered here for a long time. Several hatches were pockmarked with holes chewed open by suckers. At the passage's end sat a circular escape hatch. Liang Kuo rushed forward and gripped the turning wheel. It was stuck fast. Bearing down together, they forced the metal latches loose. The instant the hatch swung open, seawater surged inward. Jiang Chao held his breath and gripped the handrail. Everything outside lay fully submerged. Light from the lamps shone onto a 6-meter iron skiff hanging upside down at the wreck's stern. 2 mooring lines secured it. One had already snapped, and the other was wrapped around the wreck's railing. A dimly glowing ship core was set into the skiff's bow. Liang Kuo clamped the cleaver between his teeth, ready to swim outside. Jiang Chao pressed a hand firmly on his shoulder. I'll go. Your arm is hurt. I've done sea rescues before. Jiang Chao tied one rope into his waist and secured the other firmly to the inside of the hatch. He drew a deep breath and dove underwater. Frigid seawater soaked through his clothes instantly. The wreck continued its slow descent. Held back by the remaining rope, the skiff hung bow down, banging repeatedly against the stern plating. Jiang Chao edged forward along the railing. The surviving mooring rope was wedged tight inside a metal crevice. Ordinary blades could never cut through it cleanly. Hooking one foot onto the railing, he raised his rescue axe and struck the rope fastener. His first swing missed. Currents and the swaying hull pulled the blade half a meter off target. Jiang Chao readjusted his stance and struck again. Clang! Cracks spread across the metal clasp. Seawater roiled violently behind him. The frost-bitten black appendage had circled around beneath the hull. Its dark, red suckers crawled rapidly over the ship's outer plating, now less than 10 meters away. Inside the hatch, Liang Kuo hammered frantically against metal to warn Jiang Chao to return. Jiang Chao brought the axe crashing down one final time. The fastener snapped cleanly. Freed, the skiff rocketed upward with buoyant force. Liang Kuo grabbed the hatch edge, swam out of the wreck caught in the current, and hurried toward his vessel. At exactly that moment the appendage closed in. Its foremost sucker gaped wide, striking toward Jiang Chao's back. The rope around his waist went taut all at once. Liang Kuo seized the rope and, aided by the skiff's upward surge, wrenched hard outward. Jiang Chao was torn away from the stern. The sucker clamped shut directly beneath his boot sole, tearing off a large chunk of rubber. The iron skiff burst above the waves. Jiang Chao and Liang Kuo hauled themselves over its sides, gasping for air. Beneath them, the wreck was swallowed in shadow. The black appendage broke the water's surface once more, coiling toward the skiff. Liang Kuo scrambled inside the cockpit and pressed his palm against the glowing ship core. Engines full power. A dull rumble echoed from the skiff's stern. The boat lurched forward at high speed. The massive appendage scraped across the stern, tearing a sheet of metal plating loose. Liang Kuo spun the wheel, veering sharply above the sinking wreckage. "Where's your ship?" Brushing seawater off his face, Jiang Chao nodded toward the vanishing hulk. "Behind the kitchen door. Can we still make it back?" 3 minutes remaining. Liang Kuo glanced down toward the wreck vanishing beneath the waves. "I will take you there." The skiff circled alongside the wreck. The kitchen section now lay several meters under the sea surface. Jiang Chao gripped the rope loop on the boat's gunnel. Liang Kuo pulled a waterproof bag from his toolbox and pressed it into his hands. Air, pump parts, spare valves, and 2 high-pressure gas canisters. Your spear gun can make good use of them. Jiang Chao accepted the waterproof bag. "Give me your log identification code." Liang Kuo recited a string of numbers. Private channel communication was established between them. "I will contact you once the fog lifts." Liang Kuo patted the steering wheel. "I owe you my boat and my life." Jiang Chao shook his head. This was nothing more than cooperation. Liang Kuo grinned faintly. "Very well. Happy cooperation." Jiang Chao rolled over into the water. He dove downward along the wreck's outer hull. The broken kitchen porthole sat fully submerged in murky darkness. That white portal leading back to the homecoming still stood on the slanted wall, faint light leaking through its seams. Remaining portal stability time, 1 minute 8 seconds. Jiang Chao swam into the kitchen. Heavy impacts echoed continuously from the cold storage bay. The heat, feeding flesh, leeches remained trapped inside. The kitchen's outer walls were starting to fracture. He grasped the white door handle and pulled. Seawater flooded into the homecoming's corridor. Saf and Tarn were already waiting with planks and cloth wadding, quickly plugging gaps to hold back the rising water. Jiang Chao stepped over the threshold and pulled the door shut behind him. In his final glance, he watched the kitchen section of the wreck tilt down into total darkness. The cold storage bay's metal doors buckled and deformed. Countless red, black tentacles squeezed out through the cracks. The white portal slammed closed. Paint flaked away instantly, gray cracks snaking across its surface. Wreck kitchen has fully submerged. Connected zone deactivated. Exploration slot released. Exploration progress for this run, 43%. Resource portal closed. Jiang Chao slid down to sit against the wall and set the parts-filled waterproof bag beside his feet. Saf looked at his water, pale face, then toward the now vacant portal position. What happened to the other man? He made it back to his own boat. Jiang Chao steadied his breathing and looked toward the dark, red wooden gate leading to the old dock. The homecoming now held extra food, fuel, and pneumatic equipment. Out on the open sea floated another iron skiff they could reach via communication. That portal was gone. When midnight arrived, new gates would materialize once more. Only 5 days remained until the first regional marine disaster struck. Back aboard the homecoming, Jiang Chao lay flat on the deck for 10 full minutes. Damp clothing clung to his skin, and the sea wind cut deep into his bones. A huge gash split the sole of his right boot where the sucker had scraped across it. Faint red bruising ringed his heel. Saf tossed a dry cloth onto his face. "Go change your clothes." Jiang Chao sat up and stared at where the white portal had once stood. Only a patch of lighter, toned wood marked its former location. When he touched it, he could feel faint, distant vibrations, as though something had just retreated deep within the ship's structure. The wreck's kitchen had vanished beneath the waves, freeing up an exploration slot. Liang Kuo's private comm channel remained lit. Anonymous ID 621083. I have pulled clear of the wreck zone. Stern hull is damaged, but still navigable. Jiang Chao sent a reply. Anonymous ID 073914. Keep your distance. Do not drift near floating debris. Though they had exchanged real names, their captain's log profile stayed anonymous. Private comms would only display system-assigned IDs unless both sides voluntarily unlocked personal information. No one could be certain whether the voice on the other end was compromised, whether allies lurked nearby, or if cries for help were pre-laid traps. Jiang Chao closed the communication channel and began inventorying their recovered supplies. 24 cans of luncheon meat, 15 kilograms of rolled oat rations, 30 kilograms of flour, 8 liters of cooking oil, 5 kilograms of coarse salt, 20 kilograms of frozen meat. For small gas canisters, 1 set of kitchen knives, 2 high-pressure gas canisters, and a full crate of air pump replacement parts. The Homecoming's old storage hold was nearly full. Sacks of flour and oats were stacked all the way to the ceiling. Canned goods rose 3 layers deep against the walls. The frozen meat sat inside wooden crates, insulated with salvaged thermal padding from the wreck. Yet it would not keep for long. The Homecoming had no cold storage bay, and sea temperatures stayed high. In 2 days at most, the meat would start spoiling. Blocks of ice Liang Qua had chopped loose inside the wrecked kitchen were packed into the crates. Buying them 1 extra day. We get fresh meat today. Jiang Chao handed 2 chunks of frozen meat to Saf. Smoke, dry all the rest. Saf squeezed and sniffed the meat. It is safe to eat, and we have plenty of salt. Tarn walked over from the stern carrying an armful of dry firewood. Will smoke draw creatures from the sea? Keep fire small during daylight. Do most of the smoking at dusk. Jiang Chao dragged the crate of mechanical parts to the center of the deck. Our lights must stay dim, and we need to suppress all strong smells. Gill, tissue, and contaminated meats salvaged from the old dock had already proven marine anomalies were extremely sensitive to the scent of blood. The rich aroma of smoking meat could equally draw trouble. The Homecoming now held enough food to sustain 4 people for a long time, which also made it a far more conspicuous target drifting on the open sea. Jiang Chao had just pried open the maintenance crate when his entire captain's log vibrated violently. The shaking was even stronger than when the disaster countdown had first appeared. At exactly the same instant, all regional channel chat froze. Golden text materialized across the top of every survivor's log. 7th Initial Sea Region Announcement. An anonymous survivor has reached 100 points for the first time. Points converted to nautical contribution. First, time milestone rewards distributed. Nautical contribution system now active. Contribution may be earned through exploration, monster elimination, rescues, base, building, and special events. Regional contribution leaderboard will unlock 24 hours before the first marine disaster. Silence fell over the Homecoming. Jiang Chao stared at the announcement for several seconds. Someone had already hit 100 contribution points. He himself currently held 70 points. 20 earned slaying the Fog, Gill Merman, 50 from defeating the Fog, Gill Chieftain. To reach 100 before the second day was over meant that survivor had endured trials no less brutal than his own. Once the golden announcement faded, the regional chat exploded with messages. Anonymous ID 140827. 100 points? I only got 2 points after looting 6 supply crates. Anonymous ID 609331. How many points do you get killing regular mutant fish? Anyone willing to share tips? Anonymous ID 882016. Don't kid yourselves, nothing comes free out here. Anyone want to swap useful survival intel? Anonymous ID 569586. Trading practical survival hints. Open to negotiation. Anonymous ID 304725. Did somebody find an island? Anonymous ID 771420. I spotted a cluster of ships to the west, at least a dozen vessels grouped together. Might be connected to this. Anonymous ID 609331. How do you know the top survivor is over west? Anonymous ID 771420. I never said that. I only said there is a fleet assembled there. Anonymous ID 225974. People are starting to form convoys? Anonymous ID 930116. Be extremely careful joining random groups. 3 boats sailed over to join a fleet last night and were never heard from again. Messages flooded in faster and faster. Some users voiced envy, others suspicion. Many immediately tried asking how to farm contribution points. Jiang Chao scrolled slowly upward through the chat log. The survivor who had hit 100 points never posted a single reply. The system revealed no ID, vessel description, nor how they had earned their contribution. Still, the chat made one thing clear. Fleets were forming, people hunted anomalous beasts, and unknown areas had been discovered. Jiang Chao was not the only survivor given advantages by the portal gates. Everyone fought to stay alive in their own ways. To To be the first among 89,000 people to hit 100 points meant that Survivor had pulled far ahead in at least one critical field. Jiang Chao's captain's log vibrated once more. This message was private, visible only to him. Rec. Kitchen exploration settlement complete. High-value survival supplies recovered. Large anomalous creature activity documented. Assisted a fellow survivor in preserving their starting vessel. Gained 45 nautical contribution. Current total nautical contribution, 115. Jiang Chao glanced back to the recent global announcement. He had missed being the first to hit 100 points by barely half an hour. Still, this proved the anonymous leading survivor held no overwhelming lead over him. New system prompts continued to appear. Nautical contribution has reached 100. One vessel, core phase adaptation choice unlocked. Please select an upgrade path. Hull reinforcement. Repair existing hull damage and raise maximum durability cap. Cargo expansion. Enlarge primary storage hold and increase total load capacity. Portal. Anchor calibration. Improve portal stability and grant basic hazard pre-warning. All three options carried clear practical value. He pulled up the Homecoming status panel. Vessel. Homecoming. Level 2. Durability 101/115. Base cruising speed 4.5 knots. Cargo load 34/35. Crew for 6ths. Base modification slots 1. Installed modules none. Reserved portal slots 1/3. The Homecoming's current durability stood at 90, 1 against a maximum of 105. Hull reinforcement would permanently fix long-term wear and tear. Cargo expansion would ease their immediate storage crisis. Supplies recovered from the wrecked kitchen had nearly maxed out their hold. Every future portal run would push their cargo limits harder. Jiang Chao's gaze settled finally on portal, anchor calibration. Hull damage could always be fixed with materials. Extra storage could be added via modifications. But what lay on the far side of a portal could never be predicted ahead of time. His first portal opened onto the merman-infested old dock. The second led to heat, feeding flesh, leeches, and a wreck haunted by a colossal unknown sea monster. As more gates opened, far deadlier zones awaited. Early hazard warning alone might save the entire ship and its crew. Select portal, anchor calibration. A soft thud echoed deep within the hold, as though an invisible metal chain had locked firmly into the Homecoming's keel. The dark, red wooden gate leading to the old dock vibrated faintly. Pale silver, gray runes bloomed along its frame. Portal, anchor calibration complete. Newly spawned portals will display zone, type preview. Basic hazard risk assessment unlocked. Portal active duration increased by 10%. Jiang Chao placed his palm flat against the dark, red doorframe. Scents drifting through the portal grew sharper. Briny fish stench, rotting timber, and very faint wisps of wood smoke. Fire burned somewhere on the old dock. Perhaps other survivors remained there as well. Saf noticed his gesture and stepped beside him. Will you go back? Yes. Jiang Chao lowered his hand. The mermen already know about this portal. Unless they are eliminated, every time we open this gate hostiles could pour onto our ship. Saf stared at him, waiting for what came next. Your people know the mist, Woodalwell. You know what lies hidden beneath the old dock. Jiang Chao picked up the brass valve from the repair kit. Clearing the dock benefits us both. I will bring out everyone I can save. But I will not risk the homebound and everyone aboard just to save a single person. Saf fell silent for a moment, then nodded. I place myself in your hands, Captain. Jiang Chao sat back down on the deck and took apart the old-style pneumatic harpoon gun. Parts salvaged from the sunken galley were exactly what he needed to replace the worn sealing rings. The new brass valve was thicker than the original component, and the high-pressure hose could withstand far stronger airflows. First, he scrubbed salt residue from the gun barrel, then removed the cracked leather sealing ring. Turned squatted beside him and watched as he fitted the new parts. Can this weapon kill the Hunt Lord? If you hit its eyes or gills, yes. What if you hit its body? It will barely even annoy it. Turn nodded earnestly. Aim for the eyes, then. Jiang Chao glanced up at the boy. He learned fast. Once the pneumatic gun was reassembled, Jiang Chao rammed a crudely forged harpoon down the barrel and connected a compact high-pressure air tank. The pressure gauge needle climbed slowly. 100, 150, 200. No air leaked from the seals. Jiang Chao aimed the muzzle at a plank adrift off the stern and pulled the trigger. Bang! The harpoon shot out trailing rope, flying more than a dozen meters and piercing straight through the plank. Dragged by the line, the plank spun half-circle across the sea surface. Jiang Chao hauled hard. The harpoon's barbs bit deep into the wood and held fast. Old, Style pneumatic harpoon gun, repaired current air tank. 6 valid shots remaining. No longer a one-use tool, the weapon had become a reliable ranged piece of equipment aboard the homebound. Jiang Chao pulled free the harpoon and fastened 2 curved claws from a mist, gill hunt lured onto either side of its head. Ground sharp, the claws formed backward, facing barbs. Once driven into flesh, tearing free would rip away great chunks of tissue. When he had finished, he took out the incomplete source, essence crystal. The gray, black crystal was no bigger than a knuckle, crossed by flickering dark red threads deep inside. New information appeared in the captain's log. Incomplete source, essence crystal contains unpurified source, essence and biological contamination suitable for refinement, gear forging, or cabin. Module power supply direct consumption may cause severe mutation. Jiang Chao found a metal canister, lined its bottom with coarse salt, and sealed the crystal inside. He could not make use of it right now. Still, it might prove vital material for the homebound's next evolution. After the sun set, a small fire screened by planks burned on the deck. Saf sliced frozen meat into thin strips, seasoned them with salt, and hung them on a makeshift rack to smoke slowly. Thick smoke from damp wood dulled the aroma. Rhea sat nearby holding an iron bowl, her eyes fixed steadily on the broth simmering in the pot. Tern kept watch at the stern, scanning the sea at regular intervals. All was quiet around the homebound. Distress calls continued flooding across the sea region channel. Some called out for fresh water. Others reported hull breaches. One sender claimed to have found a floating isle and offered its coordinates in exchange for food. There was no way to tell which messages were genuine. Jiang Chao closed the channel and checked the portal positions. 1 minute remained until midnight. The old dock portal stayed shut. Where the second door had once stood, the surface had fully healed into ordinary bulkhead. As midnight struck, a familiar grinding vibration rose from deep within the homebound's keel. Click, click, clack. Planks bulged outwards, and a brand new doorway slowly grew into existence. Silver, gray runes lit up before the portal had even finished forming. New ship portal detected zone type. Continental facility linked location. Missed, wood isle threat assessment. Moderate estimated stabilization time. 2 hours 12 minutes. Saf jumped hastily to her feet. This new portal was a narrow doorway assembled from white animal bones. A cracked fish bone bell hung on its frame. Though untouched by wind, the bell shook of its own accord. Tink. The sound was soft, yet Saf's face drained of color at once. That is the Tide Tower distress bell. A second chime echoed from beyond the door. Immediately afterwards, a blood-soaked hand pushed through the crack and clamped tight onto the doorframe. From the darkness, a voice labored out in the fish bone tribe's tongue. The Tide Mother has left her nest. The moment the blood-stained hand gripped the frame, an immense force wrenched the arm backwards. A cry of pain came from the darkness beyond the portal. Saf's expression sharpened, and she lunged forward. Grab him. Jiang Chao was already there. He seized the man's wrist. Heavy scraping noises rolled out of the gap, as though something was dragging the injured man backwards. Blood streamed down his arm, spilled over the threshold, and drew a red trail across the homebound's wooden planks. Jiang Chao braced his heel against the doorframe. Turn rope. Turn handed over a hemp rope at once. Holding the man's wrist with one hand, Jiang Chao tied a slip knot that would not constrict further. Saf took hold of the other end, and both pulled together. A bestial snarl boomed out of the dark. A face covered in pale, gray scales slammed against the crack. Its jaws split wide to either side, lined with fine sharp fangs sinking into the injured man's calf. Clouded, milky eyes rolled against the planks, locking straight onto Jiang Chao. An update popped up in the captain's log. Missed, gill corpse, Drager detected threat level. Low target is starving. Jiang Chao planted his right foot against the door's lower edge, hauled the wounded man inwards with his left hand, drew his rescue axe, and struck down through the gap. The axe bit into the Drager's jaw, scales shattered, and black blood sprayed across the bone frame. The monster let go in pain, yet its sucker-covered hands still clung to the man's waist. Jiang Chao twisted the axe shaft and jammed the axe head against the door. Shut it. Saf in turn shoved the bone portal closed. The opening narrowed fast. One of the corpse, Drager's arms failed to pull free in time and got trapped firmly between the shutting panels. Jiang Chao released the injured man, gripped the axe with both hands, and struck twice hard against the pale, gray trapped limb. Bone snapped. The corpse, Drager, tumbled back into shadow, minus an arm. The bone door slammed fully shut. Heavy gasps from the wounded man filled the cabin. He was a man of the fish bone tribes in his 30s, clad in tattered hide armor. with bite wounds across his shoulder and thigh. His right leg was mangled, tiny transparent fish, eggs stuck within the lacerations. Saf knelt beside him and used a bone knife to pick the eggs free. Gone. How many still remain inside the tower? 9. The man's lips were pale. The tide, keeper, 2 children, and 6 tower guards. He lifted his head with difficulty. When he spotted Jiang Chao, he froze. His gaze swept over the homebound's cabin. A thought struck him, and he tried to push himself upright off the floor. The return road, Saf pressed him gently back down. Slow down. Breathe. Gon drew several ragged breaths. Starting last night, all missed, Gil merfolk abandoned their nests in the shallows. The tide, mother marched north carrying her egg sacks. Merfolk along the way round up living captives to feed her brood before the tide falls. When the tide tower lit its distress signal, survivors from nearby hiding spots fled inside. But the merfolk opened the drainage outlets beneath the tower. Water is flooding in. Jiang Chao glanced toward the bone door. With the portal anchor calibrated, he could sense conditions on the far side. Dampness, overcrowding, floodwater pounding stone walls, and footsteps steadily drawing nearer. What purpose does the tide tower serve? Gon failed to understand the question. Saf interpreted for him. Gon answered immediately. From its top you can see the entire northern shore. The ancient tide dial on the roof records sea level shifts and pinpoints the old dock location. Below the tower lie oil reserves and 2 bone-built boats. What will happen if the merfolk seize the tide tower? They will raise their eggs in the cisterns underneath. Gon gritted his teeth. The whole northern shore will become their breeding ground. That settled it. This new portal linked directly to the tide tower. Should the tower fall to the merfolk, every time the door opened they risked stepping out into a monster nest. The old dock portal was already compromised. The homebound could ill afford a second gateway vulnerable to hostile incursion. Jiang Chao stood upright. How many stories separate this portal from the tower top? Approximately 7 levels. Where are the drainage outlets? Exterior wall of the 3rd floor. Can they be sealed? The tide dial at the summit controls the sluice gates. Jiang Chao opened the status panel beside the bone portal. Linked location, Mist, Wood Isle Tide, Tower current facility integrity, 61% internal floodwater rising continuously threat assessment, moderate estimated time until total fall, 48 minutes. Jiang Chao turned towards Turn. You stay aboard. Turn made to protest, but Jiang Chao handed him the repaired pneumatic harpoon gun. Guard this door. Shoot anything that tries to come through. Ring the bell with 1 hour remaining on the timer. Turn closed his hands firmly around the harpoon gun and nodded hard. Rhea sat huddled against the wall, her face ashen. Jiang Chao looked to Saf. Do you know your way through the tide tower? I visited twice in childhood. Lead on. Saf took her bone, spear and stuffed 2 pouches of coarse salt into her belt. Gon struggled to sit upright. I am coming too. Can you even walk? The tide dial atop the tower requires a tower guard's blood to activate. Gon drew his bone knife and sliced open his palm. Blood ran down his fingers. I can operate it. Jiang Chao studied him, then pressed a short wooden staff into his hand. Stay behind if you cannot keep pace. The 3 of them reopened the bone portal. Beyond lay a narrow stone chamber. Murky floodwater reached waist deep. Blackened fish, bone talismans hung across the walls. The corpse, Drager's body lay on the floor, its severed arms still caught in the doorway. Jiang Chao stepped over the threshold and smelled heavy rot. Outside the chamber a spiral staircase wound upwards. The sound of rushing water echoed up from below. Above, clashing metal and merfolk snarls reverberated down. Gon leaned against the wall as they advanced. A cross bridge spans the 3rd floor. Merfolk climb up from the drainage tunnels and advance across it. Jiang Chao tied spare short rope from the harpoon kit around his waist. First priority, shut off the flood. They climbed the stairs. When they reached the 2nd floor, 2 missed. Gil merfolk lunged out from a corner. Saf hurled a handful of coarse salt. Grains poured into the creature's exposed gill slits, and both shrieked in agony. Jiang Chao sprinted past her. His rescue. Axe swept and bit deep into the first creature's neck. The second tried to retreat, but Saf's bone spear pierced its knee. Jiang Chao finished it with 1 more axe blow. The whole fight lasted barely more than 10 seconds. Gon glanced at the fallen bodies and kept moving onward. Half the cross bridge on floor 3 lay submerged. 3 tower guards stood with their backs against a stone gate, holding back merfolk climbing out of the flood. The foremost man had lost his left arm and fought only with a short dagger. Joy flickered across their faces when they saw Gon return, only for 5 more merfolk to surge out of the drainage tunnel. Turn that wheel. Jiang Chao pointed at the rusted iron wheel at the far end of the cross bridge. Gon limped through the water towards it. Saf followed close behind to cover him. Jiang Chao planted himself in the center of the cross bridge. Flood, water hammered against his calves with growing force. The 5 merfolk charged through the surging current. Jiang Chao raised the pneumatic harpoon gun and aimed for the leading merfolk's shoulder. Bang! The modified harpoon punched straight through its scales, barbs bursting out its back. Jiang Chao spun and wrapped the trailing rope around a stone pillar set in the bridge. The lead merfolk was yanked to a halt. The 4 behind failed to break and crashed head-long into it. Chaos erupted across the crossing. Jiang Chao set down the harpoon gun, gripped his rescue axe, and waded into the water. He split open one merfolk's gills with his blade and shattered another's wrist with a blow. A third leaped at him from the side. Claws ripped through his newly changed coat. Jiang Chao drove his shoulder against its chest, shoved it backwards through the current 2 paces, then drove his knee hard into its abdomen. The creature doubled over. The back of his axe crashed into its skull. A shout echoed from the far side of the bridge. "It moves," Gon called out. The long, rusted iron wheel turned. A deep rumble rolled through the tower walls out of doors. The flood pouring inside slowed sharply. The remaining 2 merfolk realized their danger and tried to flee back down the drainage tunnel. Jiang Chao pulled hard on the rope wrapped around the pillar. The harpoon, impaled merfolk swung sideways and slammed into its allies. The 3 surviving tower guards charged forward. Daggers and bone spears struck home. Silence returned to the cross bridge. Jiang Chao pulled his harpoon free. Its metal tip was bent. Yet the hunt, Lord, claw barbs remained undamaged. Tide, tower drainage sluice closed facility integrity, stopped dropping current integrity. 56%, how many merfolk are still above us? One of the tower guards gasped for breath as he answered. A dozen. They are battering against the stone gate to the roof chamber. The tide, keeper and the children are trapped inside. Jiang Chao looked up the spiral stairwell. A dozen enemies. Narrow tower conditions limited how many could engage at once. Yet delay too long, and the gate would give way. Now the flood had been halted, constant reinforcements had been cut off. Victory was only a matter of time. All who can still fight, follow me. Jiang Chao advanced upward, axe in hand. 4th floor. 5th floor. Every level bore scars of combat. Shattered fish, bone lanterns, overturned oil jars, black blood streaked along the stonework. Upon reaching the 6th floor, the roof, chamber gate, shook violently. 12 merfolk crowded outside. At their front stood a heavy, scaled mare. Brute nearly 2 meters tall, curved bone, plates covering its shoulders. Every impact it delivered sent tremors through the entire stone portal. Missed, gill gate, smasher detected threat level. Moderate gills protected by bone, plating. Jiang Chao halted. Ahead, an assault would funnel them along the narrow steps. If they dragged this out, the gate would collapse. He glanced at several oil jars hanging on the wall. Will this oil burn? Gon nodded. Ignites on contact with flame. Snuff all lanterns. Wait for my signal. The tower guards blew out every fish oil lamp. The 6th floor sank into complete darkness. The thunderous pounding against the gate continued unabated. Jiang Chao ordered 2 oil jars pushed down the stairs. They rolled down among the huddled merfolk, smashing open against stone. Sharp fumes of oil filled the air. Alerted by the noise, the merfolk turned toward the bottom of the stairwell. Jiang Chao lit a scrap of cloth and tossed it onto the oily floor. Flames raced along the oil trail in an instant, flooding the stairwell with blazing light. Chaos erupted among the merfolk. Protected by its thick bone armor, the gate smasher charged upward straight through fire. Jiang Chao stood at the top of the steps. He waited until the brute crossed the final 3 risers, then stepped neatly aside. Carried by its own momentum, the gate smasher crashed full force into the stone wall. Jiang Chao seized the bone plates on its back, throwing his full body weight downwards. The mare brute's feet slipped, and it toppled over the stone balustrade. Its hands scrabbled desperately at the railing, dangling outside the 6th floor, terrified of the drop. Jiang Chao raised his rescue axe and chopped down onto its clutching fingers. The gate smasher plummeted toward the tower base. A heavy crash echoed up after 2 heartbeats. Fire and the tower guards blocked the surviving merfolk further down the stairwell. The fight dragged on 10 minutes. When the last mare creature fell, only ragged breathing and the crackle of burning grease lingered inside the tide tower. Gon sank onto a stair step. His injured leg could no longer bear his weight. Saf helped him over to the stone gate leading to the roof chamber. The gate swung open inward. An elderly white-haired elder stood in the doorway. Behind him huddled 2 children and 5 wounded survivors. The elder's eyes moved to Saf, then to the blood-stained rescue axe in Jiang Chao's grip, and finally settled on the portal frame. The return road has opened again? Saf shook her head. Only one new gateway. The elder asked no further questions. He stepped aside, revealing a massive stone dial set in the very center of the roof chamber. 12 rings of fishbone and blackstone composed its face. A heavily corroded copper pointer jutted from its core. Carvings of coastlines, reefs, and tidal symbols circled its perimeter. Gon crawled across the floor to the dial and pressed his bleeding palm onto its center. Blood spread out along the carved grooves. The whole tide tower shuddered. A pale blue circle of light rose from the roof, piercing the thick fog. The distant northern shore of Mistwood all came into view. Jiang Chao stood by a window and looked out. Black forest stretched all the way down to the coast. The old dock lay further south, hidden behind dense mist. Upon the northern shallows, a colossal entity moved slowly. Its bulk resembled a mound overgrown with rotting flesh and seashells. Dozens of translucent egg sacs hung down from its abdomen. Hundreds of mistgill merfolk milled around it, driving along captives bound together with rope. Survivors of the Fishbone tribes, alongside other beings of entirely different stock. The Tide Mother truly had abandoned its nest, taking the bulk of merfolk forces with it. The old dock was likely at its most vulnerable right now. The pointer on the stone dial spun sharply and locked onto open sea. A faint, hazy sailing chart materialized across the blackstone surface. Plus 30 navigation renown, current navigation renown. 145 Mistwood, all northern shore tide data recorded. Continental anchor information acquired when Mistwood Isle enters this sea region. The homebound will receive advanced position warnings. Jiang Chao stared out toward the distant Tide Mother. They had held the tide tower. Before the Tide Mother returned to its lair, he had an opportunity to eradicate all threats connected to the first portal for good. The white-haired Tide Keeper walked over to the stone dial and retrieved a heavily verdigris-coated brass key from beneath it. This is the key for the old dock tide sluice. He placed it into Jiang Chao's palm. The last man to hold it died before the return road portal. Jiang Chao looked down at the key. Engraved on its reverse was a familiar emblem, a black-hulled sailing ship. A heavy iron anchor hanging from its bow, identical to the homebound's crest. Jiang Chao clutched the bronze key tightly in his palm. The key was only half the length of his palm, encrusted with thick verdigris. Yet its serrated teeth remained perfectly intact. The worn black sailing ship emblem on its reverse side was faded, but the drooping iron anchor carved at the bow stayed sharply defined. Jiang Chao pulled out the homeward vessel captain's log. Pale blue light swept across the surface of the key. Old Harbor Sluice key grants access to the tidal sluice of Mistwood Island's Old Harbor and its affiliated facilities. Faint matching anchor seal detected. This artifact has long been imbued with the power belonging to the homeward vessel. Jiang Chao stared at the final line. The key was undeniably linked to the homeward vessel. Still, the log offered no clues about its previous owner. The white-haired guardian priest noticed his confusion. That man came here twice, the elder said, with Saf translating his words. The first time, he stepped out through the gate of the old dock and helped the Fishbone tribe seal the underground tidal sluice. The second time, a monstrous fish outbreak ravaged the old harbor. He led several tower wardens down into the subterranean depths and never returned. Did you see him yourself? Jiang Chao asked. The old man shook his head. It happened when my grandfather was young. Grandfather said the stranger bore no gills, draped in a long black coat with strips of cloth wrapped constantly around both hands. No one ever laid eyes on his face, nor could anyone understand his speech. A glowing iron sheet hovered beside him, translating his words into our tongue. The captain's log, or some device identical to it. After the Gillmen seized the old harbor, our tribe only managed to recover this key, Saf murmured quietly. What of his body? None was ever found. The elder lifted his gaunt hand, pointing toward the southwest of the tide tower. The underground tidal well beneath the old harbor caved in. The seawater swallowed everything down there. Without a corpse, there was no way to confirm the stranger's death, nor could anyone verify whether he had been the former captain of the homeward vessel. One fact alone was certain. He wielded the homeward vessel's power and set foot on Mistwood Island far earlier than Jiang Chao. Jiang Chao tucked the key into an inner pocket pressed against his chest. Out on the distant shallows, the tide matriarch continued to trudge forward. Hordes of gillmen surrounded the entity, marching bound captives deeper into the northern fog banks. Saf stood by the window, her grip tightening fiercely around her bone spear. Her clansmen were among the prisoners. Still, She did not beg Jiang Chao to stage a rescue. Barely a dozen combat-capable defenders remained inside the tide tower, most wounded. On the homeward vessel's side, only Jiang Chao could stand his ground against elite Gilman warriors. Charging headlong after hundreds of Gilmen alongside the Tide Matriarch would amount to nothing short of suicide. Jiang Chao unfurled the northern shore tidal chart delivered by the stone disk. The Tide Matriarch was heading toward a narrow stretch of salt flats, while the old dock sat to the south. Now that the bulk of the Gilman force had departed, a wide gap separated the two locations. How long until the Tide Matriarch doubles back to the old harbor? Saf relayed the question to the elderly priest. The elder studied the ripples rippling across the tide dial. It will not return before the ebb tide ends. How much time do we have? 3 short tide marks. Converted by the captain's log's measurements, that equated to roughly 6 hours. The seawater would begin to rise once those 6 hours elapsed, and the Tide Matriarch would likely return to its nest, with the captives and newly gathered supplies. Jiang Chao pointed toward the old dock. We seize control of this place first. Saf dragged her gaze back from the distant fog. What about the people being taken away? We cannot catch up to them now, Jiang Chao answered plainly. Even if we did, we lack the manpower to escort all the captives to safety. Secure the old harbor, free the prisoners still detained within its bounds, and cut off the Gilman's retreat routes. When the Tide Matriarch comes back, it will return to a harbor no longer under its control. Saf fell silent for a moment, glancing at the injured and children sheltered within the tower. She slowly loosened her hold on the bone spear. I will go with you. You have no choice but to come, Jiang Chao said. I need someone familiar with the old harbor's waterways. Saf knew Gilman behavioral patterns, could decipher the trail markers left by the Fishbone tribe, and identify toxic plants and raw materials. Her expertise would prove vital to the operation. The elder guardian priest ordered 2 tower wardens to carry over a slender stone casket. Inside rested a fish-skin-drawn map, 2 clay jars brimming with fuel oil, and a whistle carved from solid bone. This map only details the second level of the old harbor. The subterranean tidal well is a sacred restricted zone, accessible solely to the harbor's appointed guardian priests. He pressed the bone whistle into Saf's palm. Blow 3 sharp blasts, and our hidden allies in the vicinity will rush to offer aid. Saf accepted the whistle. Jiang Chao only took the map and 1 jar of fuel oil. The remaining oil had to be reserved for defending the tide tower in their absence. Seal the entrance shut once we leave, Jiang Chao instructed Gon. Do not allow any creature near this stone chamber until we reopen the gate. Gon leaned against the stone dial, his injured leg braced fast with wooden planks. We will slay every Gilman that dares to show its face, he replied in a calm, resolute tone. Defending the tide tower had already drained most of their strength, and his vows sounded like the final resolve of a group. Backed into a hopeless corner, Jiang Chao and Saf descended the spiral stone steps down to the tower's ground floor. Gilman corpses scattered along the passage had been dragged into corners by the wardens. Their black blood mixed with receding floodwater, seeping through stone cracks into the drainage outlets. The bone gate still stood firm within the lowest stone chamber, its silvery gray etched patterns gradually dimming. Remaining stability duration for the vessel gate, 46 minutes. Standing before the portal, Jiang Chao selected the retain option. Retain Mistwood Island Tide Tower Gate Anchor. Currently retained anchors, 1/3. Retain it. The bone gate rumbled softly. Tiny silver anchor chains materialized between the gate frame and the chamber walls, before fading back into thin air. Tide Tower Gate Anchor successfully retained. Currently retained anchors, 2/3. Only 1 empty anchor slot remained. If he discovered a third gate requiring permanent anchoring later on, Jiang Chao would be forced to make a difficult trade-off. The pair passed through the bone gate and returned to the homeward vessel. Tarn stood guard outside the cabin, gripping his pressurized harpoon rifle at the ready. He exhaled in relief upon seeing Jiang Chao, then spotted the bronze key in his grasp. We can head for the old dock now. We can. Saf briefed him on the Tide Tower's predicament and the Tide Matriarch's movements. Tarn's face paled the instant he learned his clansmen had been abducted. We have to chase them down. We won't make it in time. Jiang Chao spread the fishskin map across the tabletop. There are still prisoners trapped inside the old harbor. We rescue them first. Tarn stared at the map, his lips parting as if to argue, yet he said nothing in the end. He had witnessed Jiang Chao's overwhelming combat prowess firsthand. Against hundreds of Gilmen clustered around the Tide Matriarch, the small crew aboard the homeward vessel would never get close enough to reach the captives. Jiang Chao divided their operational assignments. Tarn and Leia would remain behind to guard the ship. Tarn would man the harpoon rifle and hold the first defensive line at the vessel's entrance, while Leia tracked the vessel gate's countdown via the captain's log, striking a bronze basin every 10 minutes as a warning signal. Jiang Chao and Saf would infiltrate the old harbor. Our objective this time is not salvage. Jiang Chao ran a finger along the sharpened edge of his rescue axe. Find every survivor we can and seize control of the tidal sluice mechanism. Numerous unexplored areas existed within the old dock's warehouses, stockpiled with valuable supplies under ordinary circumstances. But with only 6 hours on the clock, stopping to loot crates would mean forfeiting the only opening left by the Tide Matriarch's departure. Jiang Chao equipped himself with the repaired pressurized harpoon rifle for crude harpoons, a rescue axe, a bone dagger, 2 sacks of rock salt, 1 jar of fuel oil, and 30 meters of hemp rope. The damaged source crystal stayed sealed within a salt jar. He refused to bring such an unstable item into active combat. Fully prepared, he walked toward the dark red wooden cabin door. Deep scratch marks left by the Gilman chieftain marred its surface, and the fishbone emblem carved at its center had dulled significantly. Jiang Chao drew forth the old harbor sluice key. The moment the metal neared the door panel, the entire structure shuddered with a deep, heavy vibration. Thud! Some colossal mechanical device hidden beneath the cabin stirred awake. The black sail engraving on the key oozed faint, dim luminescence, and a keyhole slowly split open along the door's center. Old Harbor Sluice Key detected requirements met for reactivating the old dock gate anchor. Current regional threat level, moderate multiple life signatures detected within bounds. Proceed with reactivation. Jiang Chao tightened his grip on the rescue axe. Activated. He inserted the key into the lock and twisted. The dragging clank of heavy iron chains echoed from the space behind the door. As the dark red wooden panels swung inward, a thick stench of damp rot washed over them. They stood once more inside the abandoned warehouse. Wooden crates strewn across the floor days prior had been cleared away, and the black blood from the chieftain's corpse had been diluted and washed away by seawater. No gillmen lingered inside the warehouse. Not a single patrol sound echoed through the space. Even the familiar lapping of water beneath the dock had grown faint. The silence hung unnaturally heavy. Saf knelt down and brushed her fingertips across the muddy ground. They left in a frantic hurry. Messy footprints covered the muck, nearly all leading outward from the warehouse, mixed with drag marks left by heavy-hauled objects. Jiang Chao checked the captain's log interface. Old dock exploration progress. 21% current vessel gate stability duration. 3 hours, 18 minutes. Reactivating the gate with the key granted a far longer uptime than their first passage, granting them ample leeway to carry out their mission. The two exited the warehouse. The fog hanging over the dock had thinned considerably. Gillmen that had lingered beneath the water were gone entirely, leaving only broken wooden boats and piles of floating debris scattered across the surface. The stone hut where Saf and her people had been imprisoned stood open in the distance, with 2 Gilman corpses slumped across its threshold. Upon closer inspection, Jiang Chao saw the bodies were already decomposing, having perished no less than a full day earlier. Both had their throats cleanly slit with precise, neat wounds. Saf examined the incisions closely. Killed with a bone dagger. Someone had survived within the old dock long after Jiang Chao's previous departure, eliminating the Gilman sentries. They stepped into the stone hut. All prisoner cages stood wide open, empty save for severed vine restraints scattered across the floor. A lopsided fishbone symbol had been drawn onto the stone ground. Recognizing the marking instantly, Saf pointed toward the rear wall of the hut. Survivors fled into the lower water tunnels. That is our tribe's coded trail marker. Jiang Chao followed the sign to a stack of empty wooden barrels piled against the back wall. Shifting the barrels aside revealed an iron door set low into the stone foundation, fitted with a matching keyhole. Jiang Chao inserted the bronze key. Click. The locking bolt snapped free. A downward-leading stone stairwell stretched beyond the doorway, thick iron rust permeating the air. Lighting fish oil lanterns, the pair descended underground. Carvings of the black sailing ship lined the tunnel walls, growing clearer the deeper they ventured. Unidentifiable script had been scrawled beside several engravings, text belonging neither to the Fishbone tribe nor any written language Jiang Chao recognized from his world. AF brushed her palm against one line of the strange writing. These were left by that unknown man. None among our people can decipher the characters. The captain's log failed to translate the markings, only displaying a vague system prompt beside them. Unknown civilizational script detected data severely corrupted. The detail further confirmed the key's former owner likely hailed from an entirely separate civilization. The stairwell terminated in a half-submerged subterranean hall. A colossal tidal sluice wheel rose from the hall's center, wrapped in dark green water weeds, with scattered gilman skeletons heaped beside its base. A black iron chain thicker than a grown man's arm extended down from the wheel's bottom, threading through a water gate at the hall's far end and sinking into the pitch-black waterway beyond. Every anchor carving etched into the chain matched the official emblem of the homeward vessel. The moment Jiang Chao drew near, the captain's log flared brightly in his vision. Homeward vessel anchor chain remnant detected current status. Locked anchored target located within the old harbor title, well target displays active vital signs. The instant the last line appeared on screen, the black chain went taut with brutal force. Splash! The massive tidal sluice wheel was wrenched halfway backward by the force surging from beyond the water gate. The ankle-deep floodwater surged rapidly, climbing to cover Jiang Chao's calves in seconds. A dull, resonant crash boomed from the darkness past the gate, shaking the entire underground hall on its foundations. Jiang Chao grabbed hold of the wheel's rim to steady himself. The strain traveling up the chain intensified, as if a massive vessel was being hauled upward against the current from the depths of the tidal well. The captain's log materialized once more before his eyes. Large lifeform signature detected vital activity weakening. Main tidal sluice locking mechanism sustaining structural damage, total system failure projected in 3 minutes. Saf hurried toward the hall's left wall, scraping away algae and silt with her bone dagger to expose 3 carved fishbone symbols set into the stone cracks. Flood shelter, she said, rapping her fist 3 times against the rock face. A faint double knock echoed from behind the wall after a short pause, followed by 3 more knocks in reply. Survivors were indeed trapped inside. The door is pinned shut by water pressure, Saf said as she felt along the wall's surface, soon locating an iron hand wheel embedded into the stone. She attempted to twist it, yet the wheel refused to budge an inch. The water level continued to climb steadily. Once the main sluice failed completely, the entire hall would flood, dooming the refugees sheltered behind the wall. Jiang Chao retrieved the bronze key. A lock hole clogged with verdigrease sat at the sluice wheel's base, sized perfectly for the key. He scraped away the rust buildup using his bone dagger and slid the key into position. The mechanism emitted a heavy mechanical groan when the key was rotated halfway. Clank! A rusted iron tooth jutted out from the wheel's base, locking firmly into the sluice gear and halting its backward rotation dead in its tracks. The black chain stretched rigidly taut, the entire wheel trembling faintly under the opposing force. Emergency locking tooth deployed, projected functional lifespan, 18 minutes. Locking tooth will suffer permanent damage upon expiration. 18 minutes. Jiang Chao glanced toward the shadowed water gate. It was just enough time to take a calculated risk. How much longer can the people inside hold out? Saf pressed her ear to the stone wall. Water is already seeping into their refuge. We neutralize whatever lurks beyond the water gate first. Jiang Chao pulled the key free and walked to the rear of the sluice wheel. 3 control levers lined the back wall of the hall. The left lever governed drainage channels. The right regulated the inner sluice gates, and the central iron bar connected directly to the black anchor chain, carved with the identical anchor insignia of the homeward vessel's bow. Jiang Chao gripped the central lever and pushed downward once. The rusted mechanism would not shift an inch. Saf wedged her bone spear beneath the lever's base, and the 2 bore down with their combined strength. Corroded gears ground slowly into motion, reeling the black chain back into the hull segment by segment. Violent thrashing erupted from deep within the water gate as the restrained creature struggled against the pull. The chain jerked back and forth violently, numbing both warriors' forearms. Rust ground into Jiang Chao's palm, breaking the skin. Blood trickled down his fingers into the gaps of the metal lever. A pale gray tentacle suddenly burst from the dark water, sweeping past Saf's shoulder and slamming hard into a stone pillar, punching neat rows of small cavities into the solid rock. The tip of the tentacle split open to reveal a ring of sharp, serrated teeth lining its inner cavity. Saf stumbled backward, raising her bone spear to guard her front. "Keep pulling," Jiang Chao ordered. With every notch the wheel turned, more tentacles wriggled out from the water gate, creeping along the chain toward the 2 humans. In a tangled mass resembling writhing white serpents submerged in seawater, Saf tore open a small sack of rock salt and hurled a handful directly into the open suction cavities of the appendages. The tentacles constricted sharply, letting out thin, piercing screeches upon contact with the salt. Seizing the opening, Jiang Chao forced the central lever all the way to its lowest position. 3 successive muffled detonations echoed from beneath the hull floor, and the anchor chain snapped taut in a single sharp pull. The entity trapped beyond the water gate was dragged forcibly out into the open hull waters. A massive black boulder surfaced first, fused to the carapace of some enormous beast, and pierced straight through by the black anchor chain. As the water swirled turbulently, a skull-plated head slowly lifted above the surface. The creature bore a body similar to a giant tortoise, paired with an unnaturally elongated, slender neck. Its 4 limbs had atrophied into little more than loose, gray skin stretched over bone, too feeble to support its own weight on land. Swollen crimson fleshy sacs bulged outward all along the perimeter of its carapace, with tentacles of varying thickness sprouting from each sac. Some tentacles embedded themselves into the creature's own flesh, while others coiled tightly around the anchor chain, contracting violently each time the chain was pulled taut. Saf's gaze locked onto the black boulder embedded in its back. The Anchor Warden. Ancient harbor keepers sealed this beast within the tidal well centuries ago. During high tide, it submerges to stabilize the sluice chains with its bulk. Jiang Chao studied the pulsating red sacs covering its shell. The gillmen implanted their egg clusters inside its body. Saf lifted the bone whistle to her lips and blew a shrill, echoing note that reverberated across the stone hall. The Anchor Warden raised its fogged eyes toward Saf the instant the whistle sounded, tapping one withered claw weakly against the submerged stone floor. The fleshy sacs lining its back swelled outward violently a heartbeat later, and the beast let out a pained, guttural roar before slamming its massive body into the sluice wheel with full force. Get clear. Jiang Chao tackled Saf to the ground just as the Anchor Warden's skull crashed against a stone pillar, dislodging a shower of loose rock debris. The creature had reclaimed only faint ancestral instinct from the whistle's tone, its mind fully overridden by the parasitic egg sacs growing within its body. One thick tentacle snaked up from the flooded water and coiled around Jiang Chao's calf. Sharp teeth punctured his trousers, and a burning, numbing toxin spread rapidly upward through his limb. Jiang Chao dropped to one knee, yanking free his rescue axe and hacking the blade into the center of the tentacle. The axe bit through the outer membrane, but jammed fast against the tough cartilage core. The tentacle wrenched backward violently, dragging Jiang Chao toward the Anchor Warden's carapace. A partially formed fog, Gilman erupted out of one ruptured fleshy sac, lunging straight for his face. The abomination remained connected to the sac via a thick vascular cord, its mouth lined with newly grown sharp fangs. Jiang Chao released his grip on the rescue axe, shoving one palm hard against the creature's lower jaw while drawing his bone dagger with his free hand, driving the blade deep into the unclosed gill slit along its torso. The monster's body thrashed violently. Jiang Chao twisted his bone knife, and black blood splattered across the back of his hand. The creature finally went limp. He kicked the corpse into the water, grabbed his rescue axe once more, and delivered a second heavy blow. The tentacle snapped cleanly. Jiang Chao staggered to his feet, his right leg still throbbing with numbness. A small chip had also cracked the cutting edge of the rescue axe. On the opposite side, Saf pinned an incoming tentacle with her bone spear, using the momentum of her spin to press it flat against the stone slab. Instead of driving the spear home immediately, she planted her boot on the tentacle's root and emptied the remaining sack of salt into its suction orifice. The tentacle convulsed wildly. The living anchor writhed alongside it, nearly hurling her into the sluice gate. I can't hold it much longer, Saf shouted. Jiang Chao wiped the black blood from his face and picked up the pneumatic harpoon gun. Fleshy sacs covered most of the creature's carapace, connected by a network of darker raw flesh that constricted tightly with every heave from the living anchor. This mass was the root system feeding the parasitic egg clusters. Jiang Chao raised the gun and took aim. Bang! The harpoon buried itself dead center in the fleshy root, its curved barbs sinking fully into the tissue. The fleshy sacs swelled outward at once. 7 or 8 tentacles shot straight toward Jiang Chao. Saf blew a sharp note on her bone whistle. The living anchor froze for a split second. That single pause was all Jiang Chao needed. He circled around the rotary platform and slotted the harpoon's rope into an old winch mounted on the wall. The cable. Saf dropped the whistle and braced her weight against the winch's horizontal bar. Jiang Chao cranked the mechanism hard. The rope drew taut in an instant. Dragged by the harpoon, the bulk of the fleshy root bulged upward, exposing 3 dark red fasciae wedged deep within gaps in the creature's shell plating. Agonized, The living anchor lifted a claw and slammed it hard against the stone floor. Floor tiles split open, and water sprayed everywhere. Waiting for the claw to drop back down, Jiang Chao stepped onto its back and clambered up onto the carapace. The swollen sacs were inches from his face. Each one held curled juvenile, gill-mist spawn. A handful had already slit their sac membranes open and stared out at him with unblinking eyes. One thick fascia ran along the left side. Jiang Chao brought his axe down hard. The fascia was far tougher than he expected. The blade only bit halfway through the tough tissue. Suddenly, one of the fleshy sacs ruptured. A juvenile spawn lunged onto Jiang Chao's shoulder, its sharp fangs sinking into the collar of his coat. Dropping the rescue axe, he seized the slippery creature by its neck and slammed its skull forcefully against the carapace rim twice in quick succession. The second impact caved in the spawn's cranium. He tossed the lifeless body aside, retrieved his axe, and hacked away at the original gash until the fascia tore completely. The entire mass of fleshy root peeled upward at one edge. First fascia severed, then the second. When Jiang Chao chopped through the final fascia, Saf let out a strained roar on the other side of the winch and jammed the lever downward with all her strength. The harpoon cable snapped taut. The massive parasitic egg colony was ripped clean off the living anchor's back in one brutal tear. Dark red blood gushed out in a heavy stream. The living anchor arched its neck and let out a low, mournful groan. Jiang Chao was thrown off the carapace, slamming heavily backward into the standing water. His numb lower legs kept him from scrambling upright right away. The detached mass of eggs still wriggled frantically, dozens of loose tentacles scrabbling blindly across the stone ground. Saf sprinted over, kicked over an oil jar, and let the flammable liquid pool across the pulsing flesh. She tossed a lit oil lamp onto the slick surface. Tall flames roared to life in an instant. Parasitic eggs popped and burst amid the blaze, their shrill, piercing cries echoing throughout the entire hall. Jiang Chao hauled himself upright using the rotary platform for support. The high-pitched wailing stung his eardrums and left a heavy, oppressive ache in his chest. Saf's face drained of all color in an instant. They're sending a signal. Signaling who? The Tide Mother. The last remaining egg sac exploded in the fire. A faint, rumbling hum drifted through the sluice gate into the tide well, resonating even through the thick black anchor chains strung across the space. Silence slowly settled over the hall once more. The living anchor collapsed beside the water's edge, its carapace ravaged with raw, bleeding wounds. It lacked the strength to stir, yet its breathing had grown slow and steady again. A string of system notifications materialized across the captain's log. Abnormal parasitic tissue eliminated, tide gate, changed structural integrity, restored, gained 25 nautical merit. Less than 4 minutes remained on the emergency locking gear timer. Jiang Chao walked over to the control lever on the right, with Saf hurrying to follow beside him. The two of them pressed the heavy iron bar downward together. The sluice gate slid shut gradually. The seawater flooding into the hull died down, easing the crushing pressure weighing on the tide shelter built into the rear wall. Saf rushed to the wall and twisted a large iron handwheel. This time, the mechanism turned without resistance. A stone doorway rumbled upward. Murky floodwater poured out first through the widening crack, revealing a cluster of pale, anxious faces huddled within the shelter. More than a dozen members of the Fishbone tribe were packed tightly inside. At the front stood a woman gripping a short spear, shielding the children behind her. She only led her people cautiously out into the hall once she confirmed no hostile fishfolk lingered in the space. Her gaze landed first on Saf, then shifted toward Jiang Chao. "Is there a ship outside the gates?" Saf translated her question. "There is." Jiang Chao leaned against the rotary platform, still unable to put his full weight on his injured right leg. "My vessel doesn't have room for all of you." The woman tightened her grip on her spear shaft. "When the Tide Mother returns, we will be killed regardless. Then we seal off the waterway she uses to return to her nest first." Jiang Chao set the tide gate key down on the edge of the rotary platform. "You know every corner of the old port, while I have salt, clean drinking water, and medical supplies for treating wounds. We find the rest of your scattered people first, then decide if this place can be defended." The woman turned her gaze toward Saf. "Who is this man?" Saf fell silent for a moment before answering. "He's the one who helped me and 2 children escape the old port. He also defended the tide tower for our people." The woman glanced back at the burning egg mass and the weakened living anchor resting by the waterline. She slowly lowered the tip of her spear. "My name is Waya. 6 of our hunters are trapped in the eastern drainage tunnels. If they've avoided detection, they should still have 3 fire spears left. I'll lead you to them." Jiang Chao picked up his nicked rescue axe and reached to retrieve the tide gate key when a long, mournful low cry drifted in through the sluice gate. Oh, the sound traveled through solid stone walls, rippling the surface of every pool of standing water. Multiple harsh roars from fishfolk echoed one after another from the waterways in the distance. They were answering the call. Saf stared at the smoldering egg cluster, every last trace of color draining from her cheeks. The Tide Mother has received their message. The black anchor chains began to vibrate link by link. More answering cries echoed from every corner of the abandoned port outside the sluice gate. The Tide Mother was coming back far sooner than expected.